Well, good morning, councillors and staff, and those joining us in the gallery, those joining us via live stream. Welcome to the June ordinary meeting of the Sunshine Coast Council. I want to ask the chamber to be upstanding whilst I ask Councillor Johnston to acknowledge the Traditional Custodians. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Dixon delivered the longer version this morning, I will do the shorter version. On behalf of Council, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Traditional Custodians of the Sunshine Coast local government area, the Kabi people of the coastal plains and northern hinterland, and on whose traditional lands we gather today, and the Mudjimba peoples of the southern hinterland. We wish to pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community. Thank you.
Thank you. Please remain upstanding while I invite Pastor David Tidy from the Yandina Baptist Church to read the prayer before today's meeting. Thank you, Pastor David.
Thank you, councillors. Acknowledge what you do, and I thank you for your role in our society, in our city. We pray for you on a weekly basis in our church, and we support you as a council in what you're doing, and thank you for what you bring to us as a people. Let's pray. Father God, today is an important day, and Father, each day that we come to serve you is an important day. We give you the honour and respect that you're due. We thank you for this beautiful place that we live, and for the roles that we play in our community. Father, help us to make wise and honourable decisions. Father, help us to be able to bring our city and our area into the prominent place that it deserves to be. Father, give us wisdom, understanding and knowledge. And Father, help us to honour you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor David. Please be seated. We have no apologies for today. The minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 27th of May 2021. Can I have someone move they be received and confirmed? Thank you, Councillor Cox. Seconded, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. There's no mayor or minute. Item 6, informing of conflicts of interest. Councillors, I would like to draw to your attention that on 12 October 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2009 and the Local Government Regulation 2012 came into force. The amendments include the new Chapter 5B, which sets out new legislative requirements for dealing with councillors' conflicts of interest in local government matters. These arrangements will apply to how we manage such matters at this meeting. So should you have a prescribed conflict of interest or a declarable conflict of interest, please raise it before the item. We have two presentations. The first, Councillor Natoli, would you like to bring forward your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I'd just like to bring to your attention, I did mention it once before about the generous donation that the Lions Club of Mooloolaba have made towards the infrastructure that they constantly contribute to at Charles Clarke Park at Mooloolaba. They have been involved with that since 1984, and I just want to read the letter from the President, Shirley Ellis. She said, the donation to Charles Clarke Lions Park. Charles Clarke Park has been a joint effort between Mooloolaba Lions Club and the Council since 1984. Many people have enjoyed the facilities available over the years. As a progressive council, you may be looking to improve public facilities, and we are keen to help with upgrading the park to be more user-friendly for families with an improved children's playground or seating. The club wishes to donate $5,000 to a shared project that is supported by the council. We would appreciate being engaged in dialogue with the council regarding the chosen undertaking. The history of Charles Clarke contributes to the development of the area. It is in itself an interesting story. Commendations to Council on the focus placed on waterfront recreational space, the club looks forward to enhancing this offer of support, looking forward to hearing back. And of course we did that. I allocated money last year. We put $20,000 to this project. We built a boat, which is appropriate with the wharf being and the marina being very close, but a table and chairs underneath the shade where parents could be, watch their children play. We did even bring in the Mooloolaba Primary School to have some contribution, and that's another area that I'd like to continue work, and the Lions Club were very, very supportive of that approach as well. They're a tremendous club, have a long history, very proud. They run the Fisherman's Road markets, and we heard the tremendous work that they do, and I was very privileged a couple of weeks ago to receive this acknowledgement. They did give us a cheque, which I can assure you it's already been banked. But anyway, I'd like to present this maybe to the CEO and thank the club for their great contribution that they not only make to council but to the community as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Natali. I'll take that as moved by Councillor Natali. Someone to second? Councillor Babarowski, thank you. All those in favour of receipt? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And our second presentation is Councillor Babarowski on the Sunshine Coast win in the 2021 Museums and Galleries National Award. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillors, there are many in our community, and I'm sure, trying to understand why do we pay a heritage levy. And I think the award today will help them understand how that levy contributes to a program of activities that result in awards such as this. It's my absolute delight to explain to you, councillors, that this month at the National Conference for the Museums and Galleries National Awards in Canberra, your council had a winning entry. The First Nations at Bankfoot House is a virtual reality interactive app. It uses state-of-the-art artificial intelligence to create a really authentic First Nations experience, most importantly set prior to European settlement at the Glasshouse Mountains. That suggests why the Bankfoot House precinct was chosen, because obviously there's proximity to the First Nation cultural sites. We probably are all starting to realise now that virtual reality means that you're no longer an observer, that you become an active participant in exploring these First Nations cultural sites. The technology's pretty out there. It uses geotagging, cultural mapping, and site-specific locations in and around the Glasshouse Mountains. So your participant's character can literally interact with the landscape and the First Nations people that are in this VR experience, and use the voices of the Kabi elders, and you can run through the bush, you can jump over creeks, and you can gather food as examples of what you can do. Obviously, the intent of that is to help you increase your understanding of the First Nations culture and their sustainable practices prior to European settlement. So what an excellent example of the use of the Heritage Levy and part of our 10-year Heritage Plan. I'm delighted that Peter and Claudia here are here as officers who manage our 10-year Heritage Plan. And this is a fantastic way of engaging us all, really, whether you choose to do this VR experience or not, in our region's history, and truly celebrate and raise awareness of what are absolutely unique intersections of history and culture on the Sunshine Coast. So what a pleasure, Mr Mayor and CEO, to present Council with the winner for Interpretation, Learning and Audience Engagement for the First Nations VR experience at Bankfoot House.
Well done. And congratulations to Peter and Claudia, who are with us as well. Okay, councillors, we'll move on to the next item, which is... Oh, sorry. Councillor Babarowski, I assume you'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Cox, all those in favour of receipt? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Rightio, we'll move to the opening report 8.1, application of National Competition Policy, and I invite Paul Skillen and Simon, who will give this presentation. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. Today we'll step through our application of the National Competition Policy and demonstrate to you our compliance with that policy at this point in time. We wanted to go not to the additional ones, but to the original slides. Okay, I can go to those. Okay, we'll wing it. Thank you. The National Competition Policy requires us to consider each year any new business activities that we have undertaken that reach a particular threshold. The policy was designed and came into effect in about the late 90s and was introduced as a mechanism to apply to councils and other levels of government an assurance that we would compete on equal footing with other businesses in the activities that other businesses compete with. The idea of it was not to make us more competitive. The idea of it was to make sure that we weren't using or had access to any activities or not including any costs in our expenditure that would allow us to undermine other competition. So the application of the policy actually makes us include extra costs that we wouldn't otherwise have had in order to come to how we should price the activities that we are undertaking in order to make sure that we are competitive with other markets. The application of the policy has us consider an expenditure test, which is, from those figures up there, anything above $9.9 million in expenditure is a significant business activity. Anything above 350 but less than 9.9 is a business activity, and anything less than that is not something that is considered that we need to be competitive with. In applying significant business activities, there's different parts of the legislation that we apply here. We apply a public benefit assessment, and after applying that public benefit assessment, we need to consider which of the three available options there are in order for us to ensure that we have full cross pricing. That is a word that is both appears there and appears in the legislation as the option, one of the three options that's available to us. So the options after applying for significant business activities is full cost reform pricing, commercialisation or corporatisation. The one activity that you will see in the report that we're referring to here is our waste activity. We have, since adoption of an application of this policy, applied the full cost pricing reform, which presents itself in the budget workshops to you for discussions, for this forum for discussions about how we reach that pricing, and then ultimately presents in the budget as the fees and charges relating to pricing for waste collection services and the like, and also in the utility charge that is applied to our waste business. The other two options are there, but they require significant change in the way we are doing our business. One is to make our business almost a standalone company, and then the third option, corporatisation, is to make waste its own standalone company. In applying the full cost pricing reform, when that decision was made in about 2008, full cost pricing was deemed to be the most effective. It allows waste to still sit within our organisation as a business, but noting that it is a significant business activity. The other activities, if they don't reach that $9.9 million threshold, is called, in considering new business activities, is to apply the Code of Competitive Conduct. We need to consider then whether we should apply that code or on occasions decide that for reasons such as the community benefit of what we are doing, that we don't apply the code. So there is a little bit of latitude within that decision making that doesn't exist with the significant business activities, but that latitude is not that wide that we can disregard being competitive just at our own whim. When you consider the expenditure that's been applied to each of the activities that appear in the report to you today, our waste business is north of 57 million in expenditure, quite clearly above that 9.9 threshold, and therefore a significant business activity. Our holiday parks is heading up towards the 9.9 threshold, and at some time in the future, if that figure doesn't change, then we might need to be back in this forum to discuss what it is in terms of becoming a significant business activity, but I note that it's not there yet. Similarly with quarries, it is at the $7.6 million expenditure, which still has it within the parameters of being a business activity. I am comfortable. There was some other slides that were presented in the forum. We had the additional material presented in order to step through some of the questions that we might have had. I'm comfortable to leave there and take any questions, but I could also ask to find the other slides if you would like some presentation further on that.
I think we've probably got enough information. Is the recommendation there on screen? There it is. Good. Okay. So to start with, can I have someone move, please, the recommendation? Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Johnston, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor?
Probably to give some explanation to the community. In the mid to late 1990s, a suite of market and economic reforms were introduced to stimulate growth and job creation in Australia. For local governments in Queensland, these reforms revolved around the following: the extension of trade practices laws prohibiting anti-competitive activities to all businesses, including local government businesses; the introduction of competitive neutrality so that private businesses could compete on an equal footing with those owned by local government; the review and reform to all laws that restrict competition; specific reform and price monitoring of the water industry. So in summary, for a Sunshine Coast, the recommended 2021-22 business activity structure based on the annual business activity review and identification conducted in accordance with the legislation is to apply the full cost pricing in accordance with section 44(1)(b) of the Local Government Act 2009 to the waste resource management significant business activity. Also to apply the Code of Competitive Conduct to the Sunshine Coast holiday parks and quarries business activities in accordance with sections 47 of the Local Government Act 2009, and to not apply the Code of Competitive Conduct to the International Broadband Submarine Cable Network in accordance with sections 47 of the Local Government Act. And to explain that a bit further, the cable which is laid out or buried under the sea floor connects to the cable landing station adjacent to the new Maroochydore City Centre. RTI Connectivity Proprietary Limited controls the pricing and access to the network. As such, the International Broadband Submarine Cable Network is not a business activity of council, just to give clarity. But we have to do this each year and annually check ourselves against it. We have, and this is very responsible and takes forward our legislative requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. No further speakers? Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Paul. I'd just like to thank the CEO for acknowledging some concerns that other councillors had raised in certain activities that hadn't been captured in this policy and committing to reviewing those and coming back to us in September. I understand the timing of this, that this has to be done annually and we cannot hold it out any further than that, so I'd just like to say thank you for taking that into consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. No further speakers. Do you want to close, Councillor Hungerford? No need to close. Councillors will put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? That's That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Paul and Simon.
Thank you.
Item 8.2 is the procurement policy and procurement disposal framework. Thank you, Paul. Second presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Much like the previous presentation, this is an annual adoption and sits as part of the suite of other policies to do with our debt, revenue, etc., that gets presented at around the time of the budget. And in this instance, we'll adopt a framework that will put into practice and pursue contracts that deliver on the budget and the capital works program within that budget that you have just recently adopted. The framework works on taken from the local government principles and the sound contracting principles within the Local Government Act, and then through the local government regulations requires us to adopt a procurement policy, and then allows us to adopt a strategic contracting procedures in order to deliver on our contracting for goods and services and the disposal of our valuable non-current assets. In adopting the strategic contracting procedures, we're required to have a contracting manual and a contracting plan. Further to that, we're required to have adopted any significant contracting plans, which I'll put to you shortly. And as you're aware, we have a number of guidelines that inform how we will go about particular parts of our contracting. The policy is a requirement under the legislation, regardless of which form of procurement that we undertake. So that's a yearly adoption. The manual is our how-to guide and is available to both the public and internally for council officers as an explanation on the processes and procedures that we will adopt in order to go about contracting. The contracting plan is the next document. It identifies the type of contract, so it's starting to consider the categories of procurement that we will undertake and what services we'll be requiring or acquiring from the market during the course of any particular year. This one, as all are supposed to do, considers the market assessment, and as I've said to some councillors individually, the market, particularly for construction infrastructure, is going very strongly at the moment. We're finding that we're getting a few less than normal, what we would normally consider the normal number of tender responses, and the assessment is assisting us in focusing on how we can best go about ensuring we're getting the contracting done for the value that we should be achieving in doing it. We also have the list of significant contracts attached to that plan. By way of explaining how our particular guidelines align with the corporate plan and the corporate strategies, we have a social benefit procurement guideline that informs and comes from our strong community value and also from the community strategy. Similarly, we have our reconciliation action plan, and from that a First Nations procurement guideline. We of course have our environment and livability strategy, and during the course of the next 12 months we'll be working with branches from those areas in order to develop a guideline that will better inform and guide how we consider environment and livability measures in our contracting. By way of example, I believe we're heading towards setting some targets, for example, on our emissions. About 19 to 20% of the emissions created by council, just for its existence, come from our contractors. We want to engage with them in order to understand how we can reduce that zero net emissions. We would propose using a guideline to inform both us and them how we would go about it. The final two that are in existence are the guidelines coming from our REG strategy, which is our local preference in procurement guideline, and also our innovation and market-led guideline. Quick consideration and example of each of those. Our social benefit procurement guideline, an example of contracts coming from that at the moment are with the Endeavour Foundation for our Resource Recovery Centre operations. We facilitate that by directing procurements at social benefit providers directly. That is isolating the market to say we're only going to approach them, or similarly encouraging commercial organisations to subcontract to social benefit providers when they can. In this instance, Endeavour isn't in either of those. They're effective enough and large enough industry and organisation, that could reply directly to that tender and have done so and been successful for quite a number of years in providing some really good services to council. Our First Nations guideline has been in existence and supports the pursuit of our RAP. We have our Innovate wrap at the moment, which I believe will be moving to a stretch wrap towards about 12 months from now. The spend that we've had with local First Nation, sorry, not local, with First Nation entities has declined through the years, but I wanted to put that to you that largely from our airport project, we had a significant opportunity to engage with some First Nation businesses, and we took those opportunities. So in 17 and 18, we had $705,000 spend with First Nation businesses. It started to go down after the majority of the early works were done. It bottomed out in 1920, which was about the time the project finished. Valuably and very importantly, we're starting to get a broader engagement with our First Nation businesses now, and that's starting to go up. Again, it's almost doubled from last year to this point, and I'm assuming it will double by the time we get there. It's more the fact that we had that airport runway project that gave us those opportunities in 18 and 19 that looks like we're going down now. Realistically, what happened was we went up significantly for those 2 years. We returned to about where we were, and we're now starting what I hope will be a continual incline in our First Nation engagement. A local benefit, you'll recall at this forum last year, we had a number of strategies within our procurement framework to increase the engagement with our local providers. A target, by way of example, was increasing the valuation weighting for the criterion of your local contribution to the economy from 15 to 20%. The result of all of those and a number of opportunities we've had from grant funding and the like has seen us do some increase in the value of our construction industry engagement. That's an area that we're actually above that average for. So the more we get to engage with our local construction industry, the higher that number will go. And for this year, it's tracking at about 241 million or 75% of our total available procurement spend. The Innovation Market-Led Engagement Guideline hasn't really been used that much. It allows for us to do a little bit of contracting at values higher than our standard framework would be in order to test and trial particular solutions that if we applied our current policy in its strictest form, we wouldn't be able to do as well. So it provides for some opportunities to test and trial some things without committing council for extended periods of time or extended values. We have 6 significant contracts. Those are contracts that will have a value of greater than $5 million to enter into that we've identified at this point from the budget. We're still considering some, and it's not that they all need to come at this point in time. We could bring them individually, but we are aware from the budget that was just adopted that there are 6 at the minimum at the moment. They relate to the fit out of Sunshine Coast City Hall, our Microsoft Enterprise Licensing, our pavement marking services, lifeguard services, and improvements and work at the Kawana Regional Aquatic Centre, and then our Nambour landfill expansion. During the coming year, I've spoken to most of the things that will be the improvements that we are going to have: introduction of the Environment Sustainability Guideline, ongoing markets assessment for those industries that are quite active at the moment, and we're also looking to partner with Local Buy at the moment for the introduction of a next-gen procurement ecosystem, which will give some access to some dashboards on our spend, as well as some assessment and evaluation of our spend as we're going through it. We have that at the moment, but it's a very manual and clunky process, and I think there's some opportunities to do it a bit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can we just get that resolution up? Somebody prepared to move the resolution? Thanks, Councillor Hungerford. Seconder, Councillor Natoli. Would you like to open, Councillor Hungerford?
I'll make it a short explanation because Paul's covered that pretty comprehensively actually. So just to give a summary, the Local Government Act and Local Government Regulation 2012, the regulation outlines the procurement and disposal networks through which council must conduct procurement of goods and services and disposal of non-current assets. The regulations require Council's procurement policy and the procurement and disposal of framework to be reviewed and adopted on an annual basis, and that's what we're doing today. The proposed procurement and disposal framework complies with all legislative obligations. It provides an appropriate framework for conducting effective and efficient contracting activities. The procurement policy and procurement and disposable framework will be administered by the Business and Innovation branch of Business Performance Group within Council. Resourcing is within the branch and no additional funding is required to implement or administer this framework. So the budget for each of the projects to which the significant contracting plan relates has been secured following the adoption of the budget we did this morning. So this gives the resources to carry on those activities. So councillors, this is normal legislative requirement and we're getting on with business as usual. But as Paul's saying, with the constraints of a lot of money injected into the construction side, getting effective contracts and competitive contracts, I've noticed is becoming an issue at the moment. We need to focus on that through the budget year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, my apologies, Joe. You had a query. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, Paul, and thank you for answering some of those queries that I had. I'm satisfied that the whole process of procurement is guarded in some way, that we do not end up allowing the procurement process to be open, to be exploited and to be manipulated in a particular way that ends up favouring anyone or any company. So I'm satisfied that we've got that. When the final decision's made by the group and it's handed through, what obligation is to the CEO to actually accept those recommendations? Or what scope? Is there any potential the CEO has to basically ignore that and not proceed with any of the recommendations?
Through the Chair, the short answer is that the CEO or any other person who the CEO has delegated to form those contracts, that's the final stage of accepting or not accepting the decision and putting pen to paper. That person is not bound to accept them in any way because it is the exercise of that individual's delegation that is the forming of the contract. So it is in no way the CEO or any other delegated officer are they required to, because a report says that this is the best option, are they required to do it?
So the way I read it is that we go through a process that the policy specifies, and when it gets to the final decision maker, that final decision maker is not bound by whatever decision the group has made. Is that the way I'm reading? That there is scope. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to understand if there are any legislative requirements or obligated to accept that without question, to sign off, or do they have the discretion not to accept that and not to move forward?
Through the Chair, have the discretion not to accept it. I would suggest if it was around the other way and there was a recommendation being to an officer not to proceed, I would hope that they would then not decide to proceed. So that's contrary to what the recommendation of those as evaluated have. But certainly if the evaluation panel have formed a view, made a recommendation, there is absolutely no legislative requirement for that person to accept that. They might need to explain internally why not, but the delegation and the exercise of it is to that officer in the position that they're acting.
And for that very reason, last year I asked you a question about whether you were ever directed by the CEO to gain an outcome contrary to what maybe the panel may have, and you said no, but what the CEO does with it afterwards is up to them. And I thought that was really quite an unusual response in that it made me think, well, what opportunity is there at that final process where there is probity and decision making through a policy that what happens to the visibility of that point where a CEO has control of either accepted or not accepted, and how visible is that back to the organisation and the elected councillors? And to me, I thought that that may have been a weakness in the process that we go through, that to absolutely be categorized, I'm not suggesting that you, Madam CEO, but I'm suggesting that at any point that a decision may not be supported, that at least is relayed some way through, some communication back to the elected members who trust the process to get all the way through, and we think that it's all meeting that, and it could be that the process could be manipulated right at the end. So I'm just put that to you, Madam CEO, that I'm not suggesting that that's what could happen, but I think for absolutely certainty that if ever that ever happened, that there is some process of notification that that process wasn't taken all the way through.
Thank you for your question, and thank you, Paul, for answering these questions. They're always very good questions, and we take the probity of our procurement process incredibly seriously. It would be, I would imagine, highly irregular for a panel to do a whole bunch of decision-making and come up with a decision and that then gets overturned. But there may be reasons why someone would challenge or ask questions or ask the panel to reconsider elements of evaluation, making sure that that was in line with council policies of the day, or budgets, which can sometimes come in different ways from different tenderers, that making sure that they're comparing apples with apples. So I think the process allows for, and I wouldn't say that any decision maker not agreeing with the recommendations of the panel is taking away from the process. It's actually part of the continued process, and that person maintains and holds the delegation. But I would say that it would be highly irregular for that to happen. And if it did, I would imagine that those concerns would have been negotiated and considered between the procurement panel and the delegated authority at the time.
Okay, go to Councillor Landsberg. You were there but dropped off too.
Thank you. You've answered lots of questions that I was just going to raise. I was just going to touch on with our built infrastructure, with the line marking process that we have, and we have over 2,200 kilometres of roads that are obviously done during a contract. How do we receive those KPIs in terms of, do we regularly inspect those? I know CAMs use a cyclic network, yes, and it's been really lauded as a really wonderful view of a 360 view of all our infrastructure jobs that they carry out. Yes. But yeah, do we inspect them regularly and report back, obviously, to council on those works carried out?
Through the chair, the short answer is yes, we do. When the procurement is finished, and the reason that I should add that the pavement line marking is there is because it is a cyclic contract for a number of years. If we were to make it a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, it wouldn't have penetrated the $5 million threshold, and it wouldn't be here, but we would be doing a procurement every 2 years to do that. I believe we're going to get the best value out of a multi-year contract. Once the contract is on foot, it is developed in partnership with, in this instance, the Civil Asset Management Branch. They are involved in determining what the KPIs are for contract performance of that particular contract. We develop with them, and this is a new introduction in the last 12 months, a contract management plan. That plan then is put into performance during the course of the exercise of the contract, which involves, in this instance, not a review of every metre of line marking that they do, but certainly review of the work that has been done. Or they go into considering their KPIs and then the constant engagement that goes on between principal, being council, and the contractors or contractor who's delivering the contract. We should know or will know within short time whether they're not doing what they should be, and then you start at a very lower level engagement. I don't mean low level disrespectfully, but a very hands-on engagement between a contractor who may not yet be performing to standard in order to work with them to get up to standard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the additional information in terms of the percentage for the local suppliers. Can I just ask, that figure has increased, which was really pleasing, from 70% to 75%. Was that just local suppliers or local and deemed local suppliers?
That is the overall of local and deemed local.
Okay, thank you. I found the information that you presented on the First Nations businesses also very interesting. May I make a request that next year when we have the policy presented again, that we have some more of those, that data presented to the council so that we can see how we're tracking. I know some of the measurables in the policy include that percentage, but I think if we can drill down a little bit better, it paints a better picture of how we're going with our policies.
Sure.
Thank you.
Through the chair, the RAP in its current stage, being the Innovate RAP, that is the one figure that it relates to it. We'll bring back more figures than that, but when we move to what I believe will be the stretch RAP for the next year, there are a number of higher and wider obligations, so naturally as we progress into that, there will be more reporting on it also.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of questions, if I may, Paul. So we've got the policy, the manual, the plan and the guidelines. With the contract values that are described in the policy, do they apply all the way through and into every set of guidelines? And the reason for the question is that the contract values don't appear in all of the guidelines.
No. The values in terms of the thresholds for doing particular activities?
That's right. So the thresholds of 25,000 to 250, 250
yes.
to a million to 5 plus and risk.
Yes.
Those contract values, they're in some of the guidelines but not all of the guidelines,
yes.
And they're in the overall policy. I'm just wanting to, does that cascade through everything? And I suppose if it does, the reasons that we don't display those in all of the guidelines, or just, I just want to understand and make sure what I'm reading is what happens.
Through the chair, in consideration, the guidelines and the threshold values are the first step guide in deciding which procurement route you are required or a person is required to take for getting a contract within council. That then is laid across that, the considerations of each of the guidelines. You don't apply them all because you might not. For example, the fourth guideline, there might not be any innovation, and certainly might be a market-led proposal in it. In terms then of creating the procurement activity, you are applying those guidelines to that procurement activity, and that would mean in the response form, considering and asking questions about the local preference, regardless of the value of it, save one point which I'll come back to in a moment, such that you are then considering each of the guidelines. So the short answer is yes, they do cascade through, but the guidelines inform the process, not the process inform the guideline. Now, the one place that the local isn't applied as a percentage is in the lower value ones where we expect locals only to be invited anyway. So for the occasion when we invite locals only, there isn't any value in giving a 15 or 20% weighting to being a local, because they in theory should all be capable of it. So that is applied by, in the first instance, when they're considering who to invite, going to locals only, and then that's the meeting of the guideline requirements, but you're then not applying the 15 to 20 or 20% local preference in that instance.
Okay, so in the scenario of the local one, so the local contractors got through, and then in terms of how we go through the procurement process, you then apply the contract values in the decision-making process around the reason we've got those dollar values in there.
Through the chair, no, sorry, I might not have explained it that correctly. The dollar value, we decide we need a particular service. We'll have an estimate of what that service's value is, and if I pick a figure, $200,000. We know at this point in time that our guideline expects us to invite locals only. So that is the application of the guideline. We won't be then asking them about locals. If I pick another example that gets us into a tender, which is an open tender, we're advertising it for anyone to reply, it's in that we apply the 15 or 20% local preference weighting. We ask a series of questions about why are you local, how are you spending your money, what other businesses will you subcontract with, etc., in order to evaluate and apportion a mark to them for being local. Then in that is 20% of the total evaluation criteria compared, and they're still competing against price and all of the other criteria, all in order to identify in the application of all of the criteria which one comes out as being the strict reference in the legislation is the most advantageous outcome for council. So that's moving away from buying. We don't have to go with the cheapest, we don't have to only go with local, we don't have to, we apply all of our considerations and policies and effectively score a response against each of those to come up with who scored the most as a guide to which is the most effective and most advantageous.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the answer. Just as a follow-up to that, whether we need to review how everything is presented, because as going through that, it isn't necessarily completely obvious if you're just looking from a particular point of view. For example, the social benefit guideline, it doesn't contain the contract values. So if that's where you're starting from, you may not pick up on that.
No.
And with the and thinking of the social benefit is that we go to as many. Is that a competitive process as well? That's my question.
Through the chair, the social benefit is actually one of the harder ones to consider because when you approach a market, you need to structure your procurement in order to have regard for those if you decide or see that the market can actually respond to it. And if I give you an example, there is absolutely no use in inviting some social benefit providers to apply or respond to things that they are not in the business of. So the structure of your procurement then at the first instance is to decide if a social benefit provider could do it, in which case we might consider isolating it to being only social benefit providers that we invite.
Good.
Secondly, if we decide that it's either too large a market, too big a job, we might look to structure the tender so that a commercial entity will reply, but we will value and tell them we will value them subcontracting the work or some of the work where it's appropriate from social benefit providers. So that's really a procurement structure thing. We don't want to make it so that there's no chance. And when we can, guide it to those entities that can reply in that competitive environment.
Yeah. No, that's great, thank you. And I think you've answered what's behind my question there of, for example, you mentioned Endeavour, document destruction. I'm not sure if that's the actual service, but there are a number of social benefit organisations who provide that service.
Yeah.
And just as a follow-on around the documentation, on page 94 in the First Nations guidelines, in the table there's an error, I believe, in how we're describing the various contract values.
Okay,
it just doesn't follow through logically, so just suggest checking that. Final question is, what more are we planning to do in the coming 12 months to really try and get greater benefit from that First Nations element of the procurement process? You showed us really nicely how it's changed and the reasons behind that. What are we able to do and where can we go to provide more opportunities to encourage people to tender?
Sure. Through the chair, where we're able to go is to still consider the apportionment of our evaluation criteria. That's maintaining our business as usual at the moment. We have engaged with our First Nations team within Council about supplier briefings exclusively for First Nation businesses. That's to create an environment where we can talk with them and talk them through our processes for engaging with council. Sometimes, even First Nation or not, sometimes our processes from a big organisation like we are, at least in this region, the processes that we have to go through are, they're in the framework, but some smaller businesses can struggle to engage with them. And so we're looking to engage with some First Nation businesses that want to grow in that area. We can exchange our views on how we can best do that. Following on from the supplier briefing, it's to invite them to our open supplier briefings and start to connect some of those First Nations businesses with other suppliers who they can partner with, subcontract to, in order to start to grow their business. If there's a piece of work that we've got that's just too big for them, then partnering with someone to provide one of the services within it is something we're hopeful of doing.
Thank you very much. And if I might, in that case, speak in support of the motion and encourage others as well. We're achieving and complying with our statutory requirements. And I'm just really pleased at the effort that we go to engage with local contractors and businesses, to engage with social benefit enterprises, and to engage with our First Nations community. And to hear your passion that we want to do more of that is really important, and I think it's important as ourselves to try and raise the bar even further around that local procurement to benefit our local economy. So thank you very much, and I will certainly support this today, and I hope that everyone else will consider following suit. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a few questions, if I could, please, Paul. In relation to the more remote communities, Blackall Range West, basically, I often get comments from local contractors who say, you know, the council's done this, they've brought in outside contractors, only been small jobs often, right? And the answer I get when I inquire about it is, well, they're not on our panel. So do we have the ability to, like concrete jobs, and they might only get one contract, one job every couple of years. So what's the point of them being on the panel? Do we have the freedom and the ability to call prices from the others?
Through the chair, yes is the short answer, particularly for some of that lower value stuff. The
Under
panel,
25,000 type stuff, yeah.
Yeah, definitely yes is the answer to that. The panels are created as a way of getting you a short list, so it's almost like doing half of the procurement. So you're doing the half where you know that they've got the capability, they've got the experience. Some of it can be priced, or you get your hourly rate price, or some of it can't be priced. But then when you come to using it, we're going to a few on the panel, sometimes all on the panel, for just the pricing element of it. And it's a far quicker way to engage than doing a full-blown procurement for the same thing time and time again. That doesn't mean it has to be used. Where it becomes challenging, though, is that we're probably going to informing that get the better prices. So, and then the second thing is knowing that some of these companies exist is sometimes a struggle for us. In that, if you go to that west of the Blackall Range, when it goes to forming that contract, it needs to be a smaller enough value, and then inviting a number in order to ensure we get the competition that we need. Although for below 25, we can just get one quote. It's a combination of knowing that they exist and then turning our minds to being able to invite them at a particular time.
Yep. That's, thank you. I'd really like to see us pursue that a bit more in that area, because quite often they see contractors come in from down the coast and they get quite antsy about it. Yeah. And I wasn't aware that there was an ability to go outside the panel until I've organised for some trees to be removed, and the contractors that we usually use can't do it for a couple of months. And the arborist said to me, "Oh well, you know, do you want us to engage local contractor?" And I think, well, as long as the price is competitive, yeah. You know, so There are ways of obtaining that information. I'll have a chat to you about it sometime. Right, yeah.
Through the chair, if I could add to that, having arrangements creates the ability to speed some things up in our engagement, which we have been requested to do, and the arrangements are effective at that. The biggest number of complaints that I deal with, in all honesty, is people who are on the arrangement but not being invited enough, not on the arrangement and think that others are being invited enough. And I went to a presentation just recently where someone stood up and said to me, I've been on council's arrangements, and it was a particular industry. I've been on council's arrangement for 3 years and I've never been invited once. I asked them what the arrangement was. They told me, and we don't have an arrangement for that. They had been on a local buy arrangement and hadn't been invited for 3 months. So we are constantly dealing with those tensions of trying to get that short list that gives us the ability to engage while managing those who aren't on it but still provide a competitive service. So I'd be more than happy to talk to you about how we can ensure we're getting that good service.
Okay, if there are no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Hungerford to close. No need to close. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Paul. 8.3 is the May 2021 Financial Performance Report, and I invite Isaac for a presentation. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good morning. I believe it's the morning. I'm here to present the May 2021 Financial Performance Report. Council, at the end of May, we had an operating result of $41 million, which is favourable to budget by $11 million. This consists of revenue above budget of $7.2 million and expenses below budget of $3.8 million. Some of the detail of the revenue, our cleansing charges are above budget for our rates and charges. We have additional revenue in the Sunshine Coast holiday parks in the vicinity of $2.7 million, and our refuse tips and development services fees above budget by $2.8 million. Now, in operational expenses, we have corporate savings of approximately $2 million, as well as materials and services below budget of $2.5 million. Councillors, our capital minor works program has progressed 75% completion with expenditure of $215.5 million. The core capital program has progressed 72%, which is an actual spend of $132 million. Our current end of year forecast for expenditure for the capital works program is 85%. And Council, our cash at the end of May is $119 million, with our debt at $543 million. And the recommendation today is that Council receive and note the report titled May 2021 Financial Performance Report.
Thank you, Isaac. Someone to move? Councillor Hungerford. Seconder, Councillor Natoli. Would you like to open, Councillor Hungerford?
Through you, Mr Mayor, another solid result. We're reaching the end of the financial year, so it's very good to see us in this position. Just some of the highlights that stick out for me. Council has a positive operating result of $41 million, which is $11 million above the current budget as of 31st of May 2021. As of the 31st of May 2021, $456.6 million operating revenue has been achieved, which is $7.1 million more than the current budget for the same period. Another excellent result. As of the 31st of May 2021, $404.6 million of the $408.4 million budget year to date has been expended, which resulted in an underspend of $3.8 million or 1%. Across the whole of Council, there's been a savings in corporate costs of $2 million, largely due to water and sewage, $753,000, fuel $681,000, and electricity $283,000. As of 31st of May, $215.5 million of Council's $287.3 million capital works program has been financially expended. And that's an excellent result for this time of the financial year. The core capital program has progressed 72% of budget, an actual spend of $132.2 million. Corporate major projects progressed 94%, and the Sunshine Coast Airport Runway project progressed 80% of their respective annual budgets. Council's $19.6 million road resurfacing and rehabilitation program has progressed to 84% completion in May. Alongside the reseal program, the 2.4 million bus stop replacement and installation program has progressed to 86%. And I'll make this point in regards to our budget. For the month ending the 31st of May 2021, Council had 190 million cash, excluding trust fund, with an average interest rate of 0.60%, being 0.55% above the benchmark. That's the tough financial climate we're in. And this backs up the rationale that the early payment discount, being given at 5%, when we've got such a low interest rate environment, did not make any logic at all and was actually costing the community in the long run. So we've made that decision because that money now goes back into funding things in council and services, so the ratepayers get better value for that. So I make that point very strongly. But this is a very strong result coming to the end of the year. We still have the headwinds in the year coming ahead with the capital works budget there, and we've got a flood of grant monies in there making it very uncompetitive in the environment out there to get competitive tendering. And we also need to look at that through the year with delivery of our services, and getting value for money is the thing we've got to always pursue. So I put this to you. This is an excellent response. Congratulations to the finance team and all the departments in council for another excellent result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Any further speakers? Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. I just want to ask a couple of questions. On page 143, we talk about black spot funding. And you got it? Yep, good. I'm just sort of interested that some of the funding is, some of the expenditure is substantially below the funding. For instance, black spot on Lindsay Road, it's not my division, but it says that the project was granted in November, was to be completed by April this year, but there's only half the money been spent. Is there a significant lag with some of these things, or is maybe that project not finished, or as was intended? Yeah.
What we've had with that one, Winston, is delay in the project starting because of weather conditions.
Right.
We've had during the projects, there was 2 different builds on that road, significant weather event, which caused us to halt the project, and we had to do some rectification works there before we started on the next section. So weather was the primary effect on that one there, and it was very frustrating for me getting that project out, but picking the time of the year to do projects and planning the weather is not an easy thing at the moment, but that was the primary one on that project.
All right, well, you can probably answer the next one too, because that was the Lindsay Road one, and it's the Petrie Creek Road, the same thing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think my line of questioning follows on from some of Councillor Johnston's questions. So we've currently, at the end of May, we've still got 33.5 million to complete in our capital works projects, and we've only got a month to go, so, or less than a month to go. What's the likelihood, or what's the likely carryover that we're going to see come 1 July?
Through you, Mr Mayor, so the likely amount will be about $25 million. A large portion of that is the City Hall project, so that's a timing in terms of the payments to the contractors. They're still on schedule to be finished around May, June next financial year. The other large project is the material resource facility out of Bly.
Okay, because I just note in the report it says that only 72% of the budget for the core capital programs, that excludes the Maroochydore City Centre, is that correct?
City Hall's in that core program.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
my apologies. And Winston, yeah, I've had a lot of core capital projects that have been delayed due to weather events as well, so we will have a lot of carryover projects, I think, in terms of capital works next year, which will put pressure on our team. So we've just announced the budget with a massive program for next year as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that generally the cause of the things being delayed is wet weather and things like that, because I was a bit worried that they were busy in my division doing all my work first.
It's very thoughtful of you, Councillor. Councillor Law.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Isaac, thanks very much for your report. And just confirming, May is a positive operating result, and that's the 11th one this financial year. So every month we've had a positive operating result. Is that correct?
Through the chair, positive to the budget. So we profile our budget in terms of revenue and expenditure. We're currently ahead of where we would think we'd be every month this financial year, correct?
Okay. And you would expect that to carry through to the end of the year next month for when we report on June?
Yes, correct.
Okay. In the current financial climate that we're in your experience, how would you say as an organisation we're performing in the light of the current financial situation locally, nationally and internationally?
Through the chair, it's a tricky question. Look, I believe we're doing quite well. We set our budget as best we could this current financial year, so achieve above that is a really good result. And we saw this morning's budget, operating surplus of 18.8 million. That's a really good result as well. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm inclined to agree with your point of view. And thank you for the stewardship of yourself and everyone through the last financial year as we prepare for the next one. And I will certainly be supporting the report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Would you like to close, Councillor, please?
The comment I'll make will follow on from David's. We went into this year, because of the effects of COVID, with only a very thin 4.3% operating result there. We're currently on about 2.7. We're aiming to get to 3.3, and it is looking with the monthly carryovers we've had there that we're likely to attain that 3.3, but it's still only a very thin operating result. That's why this next budget we need to attain that 18.8 absolutely to bring ourselves back into sustainability into the future. So I just make that point. It is an excellent result. We're in a good space, but we do have to keep our focus on things in the year ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Isaac. We'll move on to item 8.4, which is the Queensland Audit Office First Interim Management Report, and I invite Janine Weeks to give us a presentation. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to present the first interim audit report for the 2020-21 financial year. So our auditors come to visit us 5 times during the financial year. The first visit is for planning, and this is the second visit, which is the first interim report. During that visit, they look at our transactions for the period July to February. They look at our systems and controls and processes to assure themselves that they can rely on the financial statements that we do provide to them to make sure the systems that back those statements are reliable. It is a statutory obligation that we prepare these financial reports, and any audit report from the auditors addressed to the Mayor must come to the next ordinary meeting. As you can see from the schedule, the second interim audit has already happened, so that happened in June, so we can expect the next interim audit report to go to the next audit committee. They'll be back in July to look at the valuation of all of our assets, and then in September for the final audit of the statements. So the results of the first interim audit, in terms of our internal controls, they've classified those as partially effective. Now, the highest rating you can get is generally effective. Because we had an issue with segregation of duties in the payroll system, we achieved a partially effective control assessment. That issue has been resolved to the auditor's satisfaction, but that control status will not change for the financial year, so that stays as it is unless they find something else. In terms of financial reporting, we have no issues, which we're really proud of, given the size of our asset base, the complexity of our region-shaping projects. So that's going well. Audit significance, again on track. So that's when they look at the really big numbers and the complicated issues. Procurement's one of them, also infrastructure charges. So all of that's going well. And we've met all our milestones to date. So I've talked about the critical dates. Once they complete the final audit, we'll get the final report in October, and then the statements will be adopted as part of the annual report in November. Every year, the Auditor General submits a report to Parliament on the results of local government audits, so we get to see how all of Queensland has performed in line with ourselves. Any issues that the auditors do find during their visits are controlled through the audit committee process to make sure they're all resolved in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Someone to move? Joe, thank you. Seconded, Ted. Thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Natoli?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only to congratulate the staff. I know when I was formerly in Maroochydore Council involved with the Internal Audit Committee, and again, through this council, we had a lot more issues going for us at that time, and some very hot issues. To see the controls that we've been able to put in place, and to know that we can pick up some issues and be able to deal with them as effectively and quickly as we've been able to do, I'm confident that our internal audit structure and process that we currently have is working very well for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hungerford.
Mr Mayor. The Queensland Audit Office audits council's financial statements annually to ensure the statements give a true and fair view of council's financial position. That's a validation of what we say we're doing out there. Financial performance and cash flows for the relevant year, and they comply with the Local Government Act 2009, Local Government Regulation 2012 and the Australian Accounting Standards. Now, council has consistently received an unmodified audit option. That's the highest accolade you can get. That's the pinnacle. And to get that consistently now, this one coming up is 11 or 12 from memory.
I think it might be 12.
Yeah, getting there. That's got to be a record in Queensland. I'd love to know if anyone else has beaten that one. And I'm proud of the fact that we get there and actually congratulate all the staff in finance for putting those tables together and keeping us on track and achieving that result each year. Because we're receiving that constantly year after year, and I'm very proud of that fact. Now, this means the annual financial statements in all material aspects give a true and fair view of council's financial position and cash flows for the relevant year. And they comply with all the applicable legislation and Australian accounting standards. It's important that we stay on that path, because that helps us with our financial sustainability. And I know from being on the Audit Committee, all of our controls is partially effective, and that means while outstanding matters are still being addressed, the environment supports an audit strategy that can rely upon these controls, so they're all being met all the way through. They can't say everything's there yet because they've got to get to the end of the year and give the final result. But I'm very much looking forward to another unmodified audit option for this council. And I like to see us, we're in the top 3 councils for high financial sustainability, and ideally want us to stay in that position indefinitely. And we've got to work hard to achieve that. But I put this to you. This is another excellent result, and we're well on track financially.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Janine. We'll go to item 8.5, which is the Audit Committee meeting from 24 May, and I invite Bill Hadrill. We've had this presentation.
You have, Mr Mayor.
So I think we'll just give Bill the opportunity to answer any questions if there are any. You happy to move? Thank you. Have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Hungerford. Questions for Bill or any opening remarks, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to acknowledge that the 2 external representatives for the Internal Audit Committee, Mr Peter Dowling, who I had a lot to do with when he was also on the committee at Maroochydore, Len Scanlon, who was with the Audit Committee, Audit General, when I, back those years, involved, Both of them have now retired as part of the process and transitioning into the new role with the two new external representatives. Of course, I think the next meeting we'll get a report that we'll choose a chair for that next meeting. But I just want to put on the table the tremendous work that both of those gentlemen and commitment that they gave to our internal audit. That audit, it's always great to have external people with great broad range of knowledge and input and generally care about making sure that our processes are in order, and it's great to have them. So just want to table and acknowledge the tremendous work and thank them for the work that they do for us.
Thank you, Councillor Natali. Councillor Babarowski.
A very quick question, if I may. In 4.13, the asset management update, the report did mention that the confirmed asset information system was on schedule to be completed by 30th of June, and I just wondered, was that delivery outcome achieved?
Through you, Mr Chair. Certainly a conversation as early as this week with the asset management team indicated that they're on track for the completion of phase 3 by the 30th of June. I think there are a few sort of loose ends that they're looking to finalise in regards to that, so I'm comfortable in saying that by the 30th of June that will be wrapped up.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Bill, we're from the 1st of next month, we're moving into a new area where we will be, as a council, taking onto our books assets which were previously the responsibility of lessees, etc. So how long is it going to take for us to identify all of those assets and make sure that they're in the books and that the various programs developed for upgrades, maintenance, repairs, replacement, etc.?
Okay. Through you, Mr Mayor, I might ask a clarifying question, if I may. Councillor Johnston, is this in reference to community leases? Yes. Okay. So through you, Mr Mayor, that's a question I'll need to take on notice. I'll have that conversation with our property management branch and seek to provide some advice back to council. So I'm not in a position of providing a response, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No further questions. Would you like to close, Councillor Natali? Not necessary. Let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thanks very much, Mr Hadrill. Move to item, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 disposals here regarding easements or leases. Again, we've had presentations from Nick, so I'm going to ask him to move through 8.6 as promptly as he can. Thanks, Nick.
Good morning, everybody. Item 8.6 is a report seeking an exception to Section 236 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to dispose of an interest in land at 2 Flintwood Crescent, Palmview, to enable a sewerage easement to be registered. There's a requirement for the registration of a sewerage easement in favour of Unity Water over council land owned under a nomination of trust for park purposes, legally described as Lot 8003 on SP 305387. Lot 8003 is part of a future and larger district recreation park required to be dedicated by the developer under the Palmview Infrastructure Agreement. The purpose of this easement is to accommodate existing sewerage infrastructure as part of Stage 8 of the Harmony Estate development. All expenditure associated with this dealing will be borne by the developer of Stage 8 of the Harmony Estate. The area required for the easement is approximately 146 square metres, and the sewerage infrastructure is generally in accordance with the Palmview Structure Plan Area Infrastructure Agreement 2010. The recommendation today is to resolve, pursuant to Section 236, subsection 2 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, that an exception to dispose of an interest in land for an easement over part of Lot 8003, other than by tender or auction, applies, as the disposal is to a government agency, being Unity Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Someone to move? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Johnston. Would you like to open, Councillor?
It just might be worth making the point, I know there's been a lot of stories out recently about lack of home provision for people moving into homes, and council may not be essentially helping the development industry make these things happen and give people places to live. But I just wanted to touch on the point that we're doing absolutely everything we can. Our development assessment team are absolutely working extremely hard to get lots out of the ground, and the work that Mr Woodbridge is doing here just in terms of getting these lots and areas available for infrastructure is very important, because you could just imagine what would happen if council didn't allow this to happen and Unity Water didn't get any access for their pipe networks. You wouldn't have lots in the ground. So we are working hard in that space, and it's not just our DA team, so I just wanted to thank Nick for that.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. No further speakers. Put the motion, you don't need to close, Councillor. Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. We're going to move to item 8.7, which is the disposal of council land, lot 508 RP 881915. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just like to speak about a declarable conflict of interest on this item. I, Councillor Maria Suarez, notify that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 8.7 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 24th of June 2021. Due to my principal place of residence being located within approximately 1 kilometre of lot 508 RP 881915 Lake Vista Drive, Mudjimba Beach, which is a council-owned access restriction strip under a nomination of trust for town planning purposes. As my principal place of residence may either benefit from or be adversely affected by the decision that council makes on this matter, I will not participate in discussions or decisions until such time as council considers this declarable conflict of interest and determines whether I may or may not participate. Due to my historical knowledge of the area, knowledge of the development application for 90 Lake Vista Drive, and understanding of the neighbouring residents' concerns, I believe that I have valuable information to add to the debate, and without my participation, the neighbouring residents will not have adequate representation. I am of the opinion that I can participate in the discussion and vote on this matter, and in doing so, my participation will not lead to a decision that is contrary to the public interest. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must by resolution decide my participation or otherwise in making a decision on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillors, in accordance with section 150 ES brackets 3 brackets B brackets I of the Local Government Act 2009, I now call for a councillor to move that Councillor Suarez either stay or leave the chamber for the duration of the discussion and decision on this matter. Councillors, should the majority decide it is in the public interest for Councillor Suarez to stay in the meeting for the duration of this matter, reasons for that decision will be recorded in the minutes. Someone prepared to move either stay or leave? Councillor Law. Sorry, I couldn't see you around the corner.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I would move that Councillor Suarez may stay in the chamber on the basis of extensive local knowledge held as the Division Councillor. Yes.
Okay. Do you wish to speak at all, Councillor? No? Anybody wish to speak, ask a question? Okay. We have a mover and a seconder that Councillor Suarez should stay in the meeting. All those in favour, raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. So, Councillor Suarez, you're right to stay. So I'm going to move on to Nick to give us the presentation for the disposal of that council-owned land. Thank you.
Item 8.7 is a report seeking Council to resolve pursuant to Section 54 of the Land Titles Act 1994 that Sunshine Coast Regional Council, as the registered landowner of Lot 508 on RP 881915, dedicates Lot 508 as a road for public use by the registration of a designation notice. Lot 508 is located at Lake Vista Drive, Mudjimba Beach, being a council-owned access restriction strip under a nomination of trust for town planning purposes. Lot 508 is 2 square metres in size and is adjacent to a privately owned and rurally zoned Lot 3 on RP 226782. In December 2019, the registered landowner at the time of the adjacent Lot 3 submitted a development application for a material change of use to develop 8 short-term accommodation cabins on the 19-hectare lot located at 90 Lake Vista Drive, Mudjimba Beach. And the development application included a request for Council's landowner's consent for legal access over Lot 508. Legal access to Lot 3 is via Nile Road to the northwest. However, a physical barrier has been installed by Council at the start of Nile Road to prevent vehicular access beyond the barrier. Nile Road is currently unsealed, unmaintained, densely vegetated, and is currently not trafficable. Therefore, Lot 3 for some time has been accessed via Lake Vista Drive over Lot 508. Following an internal request for comments process, Council granted landowners consent for the applicant to access Lot 3 over Lot 508 and lodge a development application for assessment against the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014. A summary of Council's decision to grant landowners consent over Lot 508 is included in the report. The recommendation today is to resolve, pursuant to Section 54 of the Land Titles Act 1994, that Sunshine Coast Regional Council, as the registered landowner of Lot 508 on RP 881915, dedicates Lot 508 as a road for public use by the registration of a designation notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Someone to move? Councillor Hungerford. Yep.
I do this on behalf of the residents, especially the 34 submitters, that Council receive and note the report titled Disposal of Council-Owned Land, Lot 508, RP 881915, and B, as the registered landowner of Lot 508, RP 881915, resolve not to dedicate the lot as a public road, a road for public use. I ask for a second.
Someone happy to second? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Would you like to open on that, Councillor?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I do this on behalf of the residents there because this is a code accessible application. It's not advertised as such and residents don't get submitters' rights, especially the 34 submitters. And they look forward to Council to be their voice and determine this matter. And I put this forward in their interest. Lot 508 RP 881915 is a 2 square metre access restriction strip owned by Council under the nomination of trust for town planning purposes. Lot 508 currently restricts legal access to the adjacent privately owned and rurally zoned lot RP 226782. Lake Vista Drive was not constructed to its end, to provide access to this lot, as it was only designed to service the new rural residential lots and not designed to be suitable for use by large vehicles or machinery, as expected to be associated with rural uses. This is further evidenced by the location of the turnaround area provided for waste collection vehicles at the location that the smaller lots obtain driveway access. In December 2019, the registered landowner of Lot 3 RP 226782 submitted a development application for a material change of use MCU to develop 8 short-term accommodation cabins on the 19-hectare lot located at 90 Lake Vista Drive, Mudjimba Beach. The development application included a request for Council's landowner consent for legal access over the lot. Legal access to Lot 3 RP 226782 is currently via Nile Road to the northwest. Now, due to the administrative nature of this report, no community engagement has been undertaken or is required. And this is pretty harsh for the residents there because they want to be heard. Access over lot 508, RP 88915 by the adjoining landowner of lot 3, RP 22672 is relevant to the development application submitted to Council in June 2019, MCU 19/0138. The development application was code accessible application and public notification was not required by planning legislation. However, submissions were received and contemplated by Council's Development Services branch in the assessment of the application. Now, there was a total of 34 submissions were received by Development Services in relation to MCU 19/0138. The resident submissions included concerns regarding traffic impacts resulting from the use of Lake Vista Drive, concerns regarding the vegetation removal and works being undertaken on the land and associated with the establishment of the use, concerns regarding the potential for noise impacts resulting from the proposed use, concerns about the intended nature of the development as a result of advertising the premises as a functioning facility which has not been applied for, provision of appropriate road access and internal driveways, provision of separation of building and associated works from native vegetation and koala habitat areas, provision of setbacks to adjoining premises for car parking and effluent disposal areas, provision of adequate water supply for bushfire management and guest use. Despite Lot 3, RP 226782 being zoned rural, Lake Vista Road was constructed to service the residential lots adjacent to the roadway. Therefore, the Lake Vista Drive would not be sealed to a suitable standard for large, heavy rural vehicles and/or machinery. So I put this forward on behalf of those residents, and the key considerations, I believe, is the rationale behind the creation of Lot 508 RP 88915. It was to protect the surrounding rural residential properties from impacts that would be associated with adjoining rural land and rural uses. Also, the rural zone allows for a wide range of rural activities, including animal husbandry, aquaculture, cropping, intensive horticulture, roadside stalls, rural industries, wholesale nurseries and wineries.
Can I just get an extension for you, Councillor?
Thank you.
Councillor Dixon, someone else to second. Councillor Johnston, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
All lots in this area were zoned rural. However, in 1993-94, a rural residential estate was established adjoining Lot 3 RP 226782. The estate is considered rural residential as the lot sizes are on average 1.5 acres in size compared to Lot 3, which has 19 hectares of land. Lake Vista Drive was not constructed to its end. That is, it was not constructed to the boundary of Lot 3 as access to Lot 3 was never intended to be created from Lake Vista Drive. At the time of establishing the rural residential estate in 1993-94, the impacts from reuse activities on surrounding residents was foreseen and accounted for. The historic access to Lot 3 has been previously undertaken in a low-key and understanding way. The use was simply to access the dwelling. No rural activity was historically occurred on Lot 3. The future uses and activities of Lot 3 have not been determined by the current owner or any future owner. As such, the impact of heavy vehicles on Lake Vista Drive is also unknown. The risk of removing the access restriction strip at Lot 508 RP 88915 would mean that the rural residential residents will be impacted with increased traffic that is likely to consist of heavy vehicle traffic, and the risk to council is the increased capital works requirements to bring the roads up to standard for heavy vehicles. That would apply not only to Lake Vista Drive but the other rural residential streets these vehicles would have to navigate to gain access to Lot 3. So due to the unknown future uses that may be undertaken at Lot 3 and the associated impacts this would cause on surrounding rural residential property owners, it is considered it is more suitable for Lot 3 to use the currently designated legal access via Nile Road. I put this forward on behalf of the residents as an alternative motion for consideration by Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Well, that is the motion. Councillor Suarez.
Just have a question, Mr Mayor. In light of the changed motion, I notice there may be some nervousness in my participation continuing forward. Is there an opportunity, and probably to let the councillors know, my intent to stay in this meeting is to provide information so that you can make an informed decision. Is there any opportunity to, if the other councillors have any hesitation, to speak to the motion but not vote if the others are feeling uncomfortable?
Well, I think that decision has been made by the councillors who supported unanimously that you can stay in the room. If they feel uncomfortable by anything you might say or ask.
But I'm just raising this because that vote was made before the new resolution.
Yeah. Well, there was no motion that had been moved at that point. So, Councillor Hungerford put up an alternate, and that's what's been accepted by the chamber. So that's what we're working to.
All right, just putting it out there.
That's fine. She hasn't pressed the button yet, so I'm going to go to Councillor Babarowski first of all, and then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just want to ask a question. Is it possible for us to get some advice on the construction standards of the existing road? Because a lot of commentary is around its suitability for heavy vehicles. I'm imagining that it's being constructed to a standard, and the substrate may well be at the standard for general traffic, which would include heavy vehicles. But is it possible to understand to what standards has that road been constructed, and is it suitable for general traffic, including heavy vehicles?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Babarowski, the traffic engineering report associated with the development approval stated that the development was not expected to generate more than 30 movements in an hour, and the road hierarchy of Lake Vista Drive was sufficient to meet that demand created by the short-term accommodation use. Lake Vista Drive at the time was constructed to service rural residential lots and not the rural lot being Lot 3. I'm unable to comment on whether or not large vehicles and large machinery and volumes of large vehicles and large machinery would be suitable on that road, but I imagine that it was constructed to service rural residential lots, being residential dwellings, rather than a rurally zoned lot in isolation.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for that additional information in terms of the road construction. 30 vehicles per hour maximum, I would imagine. I can't see it's going to have too much of an impact upon that road network. What I can see, however, is that by not resolving this and effectively asking the applicant to go through Nile Road, there will be significant environmental impacts in trying to create access through that particular unformed road reserve. I would then imagine that the residents in Lakewood Drive would also be concerned with traffic movements. So by resolving or not resolving for this particular resolution here today, we'd actually be forcing it upon other residents, and I don't think that that's a logical explanation, and that is why I will not be supporting this here today. And if it doesn't get the support amongst council, I will move the original officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Cox, you're absolutely right. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with this one. And in terms of your question, Councillor Babarowski, there was a information request which came through late yesterday afternoon about the capacity of the road. It says Lake Vista Drive would not be sealed to a suitable standard for large or heavy rural vehicles and or machinery. I just have a question which I may direct perhaps to James Rapre. I'm not going to speak too much to the development application because that has already been and gone through council, and you're right, Councillor Cox, 33 vehicle traffic movements per day for 8 cabins would not be a significant impact. The reason the residents have concerns is because they're not sure about the future use on that lot, because the lot has been subsequently sold. The application is currently in the Planning and Environment Court, and they're challenging some of the conditions that were placed on that development application. The land is settled. The previous owner is continuing with this court action in the Planning and Environment Court, and the residents are not sure of the future use by the current owner or any future owners. But I do have a question for James Rapre. At the end of the Lake Vista Drive on the southern side, there is a black and white sign with vertical black and white stripes which signifies the end of the road. There was also another sign on the northern part of Lake Vista Drive to also signify the end of the road. That sign was removed in 2019, and I'm unsure if that was given permission to have that sign removed by council or if that was done without approval. I'm not sure if you can answer that. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot with that one.
It's okay. Through you, Mr Mayor. I'm unsure if that was done through a previous approval or approval at the time or any approval at all, Councillor, but I can certainly look into that and come back with further information to Council.
Thank you. Also, James, James, I have more questions for you. And it's around the uses that go with the rural lot. So the consistent uses on the rural lot could include intensive animal industry, which would be less than 21 standard units of pigs or 1,000 birds or poultry, or 50 standard units of cattle or 350 sheep. Would that use be appropriate to be applied for by the owners of Lot 3 or any future owners of Lot 3?
I think all of the applicable uses within the zone could be applied for by any of those particular lots, Councillor.
Okay, well then I'll just quickly touch on, just for the benefit of the other councillors in the room, the other applicable uses that would be consistent with that lot would include intensive horticulture, and that uses temperature-controlled environments to increase productivity and reduce the risk of weather or other external factors. It would also include rural industry, which is the handling, treating, production, processing, storage or packaging of animal or plant agricultural products for commercial purposes. And it would also comply for a rural workers' accommodation for no more than 20 people. It would also include the provision for a wholesale nursery or a winery. James, would those consistent uses likely require the use of large or heavy rural vehicles?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Look, some of those certainly would require the use of some form of heavy vehicle to either service the use on site or for transport of materials produced, Councillor. Those would have to be assessed through an application process, whether it's a code application or otherwise. That traffic assessment would need to be done, and as in the case for the application that has been discussed for this particular lot, that would form part of the basis of any conditions package that may look to be imposed for road, intersection or access upgrades.
Okay. To Councillor Peter Cox, I don't know if anyone in this room can actually answer this question for me. Lakewood and Monac Road are currently unsealed, and that is the route that the property owner would need to take to access Nile Road to access their property. It is in our 10-year capital works project to be sealed in mid-2020, so 24-25 currently. but I don't know what standard of road seal that would be, they are currently looking at. The lots on that route to access their legal access are much larger than the lots on the route to access their lot via Lake Vista Drive. The average...
Councillor, can I just get you an extension, please? Someone move. Councillor Hungerford, seconded. Councillor Johnston, those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Carry on.
The route for access to the property via Lake Vista Drive has an average lot size of about 5,003 square metres, which is approximately an acre and a quarter. The route to access their legal access, which is Nile Road, is much larger lots, the majority of which are about 40,000 square metres, which I can't really work out what that is in terms of acres, 10 acres. So much larger, more consistent with rural use. There are a few owners in that area who currently operate businesses who have large vans and vehicles in that area. There are no footpaths on the sealed road sections, which would be the access to Lake Vista Drive. So people walk, cycle and push their prams along the sealed road. There has been no consultation with residents, and I did take the opportunity to speak with some local residents late yesterday afternoon and ask them why, or what their concerns were, what they were asking of me as their representative. And some of the things that they brought up was they bought in that area because it was a cul-de-sac and it was safe. Their kids play in the cul-de-sac, learn how to ride their bike there. It was private and secluded. They are fearful of the unknown future uses that will be associated with that site and the impacts that it may have on their livability. They feel helpless at the lack of say they have in regards to future applications on the site, as they will be code-accessible MCUs. And they have watched in disbelief at some of the previous activities that occurred on the site that were not approved by council, and have asked how can they be allowed to get away with this. I did speak to the residents and explain to them it is a rural lot and all of those uses are allowable on that lot. So regardless of the access, they need to expect that there will be some future use on that site. The point of today's discussion about where that access is the long-term view of is it appropriate to put whatever the future use is in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, down the rural residential roads with the smaller lots, or down Nile Road where there are larger lots that would have more rural uses. That's what I'm advocating, and that's what I wanted to convey to you guys today, to have that full background. And like I said, you are damned if you do and damned if you don't, but with that long-term view, I would assume that the best outcome is to have that access off Nile Road. And historically, the previous owners used to access via Lake Vista Drive, and they would drive around that end of road sign, but they only used the site as their dwelling. There were no rural uses on that site. So that is why the community previously had not been too concerned, but now that the uses could increase, this is why they are concerned.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question in regard to the comment about the legal matter. So there's currently a legal matter and we need a resolution today, or sorry, before the end of June to help resolve that. Could you just give us a bit more context around the legal matter, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, and without going into too much detail because this is before the courts, Councillor, when the code-accessible MCU was approved and the development permit issued by Council, there is the opportunity for the applicant to appeal elements of the conditions. That is what has happened. So the matter before the courts at the moment is an appeal against the conditions issued as part of that development permit. Probably can't go into too much more detail than that here in the public forum. Because the matter is currently under litigation in the Planning and Environment Court, it's put the current permit in a position where effectively the court will have to decide what the outcome of those conditions or any variations to those conditions may be. Should council not resolve to dedicate the lot to the land, it would mean that that permit effectively cannot be acted on in the way that the conditions were drafted, so that would have to be revisited. That may present a risk that the court may impose those conditions. It may present a risk that the applicant would have grounds for further appeal against the permit. So I just wanted to make sure that the councillors are also aware of that element through the litigation process.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, are there no further speakers? Well, I'll go back to Councillor Hungerford to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. Code accessible application, residents get little to no feedback into it. They got significant concerns there and has been stated. I'm not going to re-prosecute all the arguments again. But I put this up for those residents, especially the 34 submitters, for council to consider this so they can at least see the democratic process, hears them and assesses the points there, and that's why I put this forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. Righty, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Babarowski, Councillor Natoli, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor Suarez, Councillor Jamieson. Those opposed? Councillor Landsberg, Councillor Cox, Councillor Craig, Councillor Law. The motion's carried. Thank you, Nick. Let's go on to the next item, which is 8.8, which is a disposal of lease of council-owned land.
Item 8.8 is a report seeking an exception to Section 236 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to dispose of an interest in land at Kawana Batinya to enable a lease for car parking purposes to be registered. Lot 102 on SP 299796 was transferred to Council from Stockland in August 2018 as per Clause 13B of the Kawana Waters Development Agreement. And the terms of the land transfer to Council included that the site is to be used for car parking purposes for at least 15 years after the transfer date to Council. Council's landowner's consent was granted in May 2021 to allow the adjoining landowner, being B Associated Limited, to lodge a development application with Council. The development application is for the development and use of approximately 1,600 square metres of Council freehold land, legally described as Lot 102, adjacent to the Vitality Village development for car parking purposes. The proposed car parking design provides car parking spaces for approximately 74 motor vehicles and 6 motorcycles. B will fund the car park construction and will be required to enter into a lease agreement with Council for the ongoing use of the car park. Ultimately, the car park will become Council's asset to manage and maintain upon expiry of any tenure agreement entered into between Council and B. The proposed term of the lease agreement is for 5 years plus a 3-year option. B only require the car park for use during business hours, being 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, Monday to Friday, and therefore it is proposed that the car park is made available to the public outside of these hours and on public holidays. To offset 50% of the design and planning costs associated with the preparation of the car parking facility layout design and construction costs, estimated to be approximately $240,000, Council will offer to Look B a lease agreement incentive of $1 per annum for the first 3 years, and the annual rental will then revert to a market rate of approximately $40,000 per annum, assessed in accordance with an independent commercial market rental assessment obtained by Savills. The recommendation today is to resolve pursuant to Section 236, subsection 2 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 that an exception to dispose of an interest in land for a lease over part of Lot 102, other than by tender or auction, applies, as the disposal is to an adjoining landowner, being B. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Someone to move, please. Councillor Cox. Seconder. Councillor Babarowski. Would you like to open, Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Nick. As the report states, this lot is council freehold land and is owned for car parking purposes. Landowner's consent was given to be associated to lodge the DA with council, and as we've just heard, it's for 74 car parks and 6 motorbike parks. I certainly wanted to just thank the staff that have been involved with this particular one, and I note that Ms Robinson up the back and I think Ms Martin's had a fair bit to do with this one as well, because I see this as being a real win-win for the community. So B, obviously not-for-profit, running the Vitality Village down there, doing great work and looking forward to sort of their premise opening very shortly. But the win-win is for the public access, which we've heard is being available after 7 p.m. through 7 a.m, and that will benefit potentially some of the staff at the hospital or people attending night quarter. So I do appreciate the work that's gone into it. It hasn't been easy, and I will be supporting this here today.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Any further speakers? Okay, do you need to close? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Nick. We've got one more, which is 8.9. Disposal of council easement, lot 80, SP 305312.
Item 8.9 is a report seeking an exception to Section 236 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to dispose of an interest in land at 54 First Avenue, Maroochydore, to enable a volumetric electric easement to be registered. There's a requirement for the registration of this easement in favour of Energex Limited over council freehold land legally described as Lot 80 on SP 305312. The purpose of the easement is to accommodate electrical infrastructure, being the electrical room and trench for the Sunshine Coast City Hall. The electrical room is proposed to accommodate 2 Energex transformers. Costs associated with facilitating this easement include survey plan and easement document preparation fees and registration fees payable to the Titles Office to register the dealing. The area required for the easement is approximately 538 cubed metres, and the easement area encompasses the external extents of the trench of the Sunshine Coast City Hall building and the internal dimensions of the electrical room that is located within the footprint of the building. The recommendation today is to resolve pursuant to Section 236, subsection 2 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 that an exception to dispose of an interest in land for an easement over part of Lot 80 other than by tender or auction applies as the disposal is to a government agency, being Energex.
Thank you. Councillor Natoli has indicated he'll move. Have a seconder. Councillor Babarowski. Would you like to open, Councillor Natoli? No need to open. Straightforward. Anybody wish to raise questions or speak? No. No need to close. Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, I think, thank you, Nick, for your presentations. I think there might be an appropriate time to take a break. It's near on 1 o'clock and we can gather again at 1:30. Thank you. Okay, councillors. Right. Okay, councillors, let's get back to business. We're up to item 8.10, the management plan for domestic animals. And I invite Tanya to give us a presentation. Thanks, Tanya.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present the management plan for domestic animals, cats and dogs, 2021 to 2030. Responsible pet ownership is extremely important in our community so that we can share public spaces safely, protect our environment, and ensure that these spaces can be enjoyed by all. In 2014, Council adopted the Domestic Animal Management Strategy, which concluded at the end of 2020. Over that period, the population grew and so did the number of domestic animals. The strategy delivered outcomes in the following areas as detailed in its action plan. This included the development of an education program for 3 to 6-year-olds, which includes a bite prevention program education. the development of a mobile-friendly website allowing the community to identify off-leash areas and also areas where dogs are prohibited. Dog barking seminars were held to assist the community in managing barking dog issues, and funding rods supported desexing and microchipping initiatives, as well as assistance in the rehoming of unwanted pets. As you can see from the slide, there was also a general improvement in the key indicators for responsible pet ownership, with a 26% increase in dog registrations and a 30% increase in cat registrations. The management plan for domestic animals, cats and dogs, has been developed with feedback from our community, which was undertaken in 2 stages. Initial consultation to create the framework of the plan, and then second round of consultation on the draft plan. During initial consultation, feedback was also provided by our pet partners, internal council stakeholders and councillors. A purpose emerged during the initial consultation, which was to create a harmonious coexistence between people, pets and places. And these would be achieved through empowering responsible pet ownership, providing service excellence in animal management, and ensuring places and spaces are safe, sustainable, accessible and environmentally friendly. Once the draft plan was created, consultation was undertaken again with the community to ensure that we'd considered all aspects of responsible pet ownership. This was undertaken in early 2021. An issue highlighted by the community in the feedback received was a lack of attention on responsible cat ownership, and this came through pretty clearly. And this has been identified and included as a specific action in the action plan, with targeted media and education and focus in that space. This resulted in the development of an action plan after we received the feedback, as well as a snapshot of the plan, so just a summary and shorter version of the plan, which will be provided to the community. The 3 outcomes are summarised as happy, healthy pets, safe and inclusive places, and educated and informed people. The action plan, which will be reviewed annually, to ensure that we deliver on these outcomes and the details of how these will be achieved. The activities related to achieving the outcomes are funded from registration fees collected under the Animal Management Cats and Dogs Act, which are legislated to be used for responsible pet ownership activities. We are bringing forward the final plan to Council for endorsement. Just one note, as per the additional information, there is a grammatical error which will be corrected prior to publishing on page 26. There is an additional "and" which will be removed. Thank you.
Councillor Natali.
That's possible, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you can move an alternate, or you can move, I guess, what's there with, you've got it on the screen, have you? Yep, that's fine. You're moving an alternate motion.
Yeah, do you want me to read that out before a seconder, or would you like?
Well, I think I'll give everyone the opportunity just to digest that for the moment, and then I'll call for a seconder. Is that a line drawn through Chair to the Council workshop, or am I seeing it? Good, okay. Well, let's get a seconder, and then Councillor Natali can talk to his motion. Someone prepared to second? Thanks, Councillor Dixon. The floor is yours, Councillor Natali.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors. Obviously, a community like ours, with the number of pets that we have, it's something that we have to manage. We have to have a plan, and it's appropriate that we have a plan that we can deal with not just 1 year, but over this 9-year period that we're facing. And it's clearly indicated that as time goes on, you know, with densities, there's going to be real challenges for us. And where I live in Harmony, you know, like we've got very small lots, and dog ownership hasn't reduced. And it can be challenging when the dogs start barking. And those issues are really important for us as a community. But more importantly, I think, is that we have to understand that At times, we understand that we have dogs in our community, and there are people in our community that don't actually like to have pets or animals around them. And so we navigate through this really difficult conundrum where we've got people that love pets and people that don't, and people that don't want other people's pets to come near them, and other people are quite happy for them to come near them. So trying to manage and work a way through that we can find a happy medium is really challenging. Reading through this document, you know, obviously a lot of work has gone in gathering community feedback and so forth. And I thought, for me, there's a slight disconnect with some of the comments that came back through the feedback about the amount of dog waste that's been found, and just some of the issues that were raised, and constantly there was a constant theme coming through. And I just didn't think the plan itself actually dealt with some of the critical issues that we've got, especially some of these hotspots. We've raised that issue as hotspots, and I was hoping maybe this plan could have had part of its action plan that would have had that incorporated, where we can take stronger action when the community is really quite unsettled and disturbed by the actions of irresponsible dog owners. It's not the dog's fault, it's the owners that actually control those dogs. And we have a number of locations in our local government area that we have problems and we've got issues. And so the changes that I brought forward really deal with three things that I feel are critical for us to be able to find some sort of happy balance. The first part in C1 is really about trying to identify how we deal with hotspots. How do we deal when we've got major issues with dogs and we're getting complaints, and we're constantly being barraged by the community in regards to doing something about it. And really, that is a process that I think, you know, it was incumbent upon me to try and find a process that we allow the organisation to respond. And rather than sort of say, have this in the plan now, is work up through this process and come back with specific dates. So the dates, I've obviously talked to the officers about this, and they're quite comfortable with these dates being incorporated. So it gives us the opportunity to identify hotspots and identify where we can bring in zero tolerance possibly as part of the process, where we give enough warning to the community that we've got an issue in a particular area and that we want the community to respond. And if they don't, then we'll come down hard on them. I think that's appropriate for us. There's no fear for those dog owners that do the right thing. Those dog owners who do the right thing are actually probably some of the most vocal people when it comes to those that do the wrong thing, because they bring disrepute to them and to the area and create real issues for them, because they then end up being labelled as part of that. The second part is that I've had 2 people in the last 6 months that have had long-term barking issues next door. And I thought 3 years is a long time for them to be put through that agony of dealing with having to go through and basically log noise complaints. And it's an onerous process, but what I've noticed is that at the end of the 3 years, they are just exhausted. They need some respite, and thank you, Tanya, for taking the action. And I think we need to shorten that. We need to identify come-ups, and again, giving the organisation time to come up with a solution to how we better manage that. The final part is that one of the comments that I've had from the community is that our officers probably spend too much time with, instead of enforcement, giving information and education. That's an important component, but maybe the community through a volunteer process could do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to giving information. And I've noticed with our turtle care program, we've got some of the best volunteers that just are so well trained that maybe if we can get to that sort of level where they can do the training and talk at schools and wherever it might be, and they may even be able to help place dogs into other homes from refuge that we have, especially with the elderly. I think that's an area that in the plan it talked about people with mental health issues. But I think people with elderly are really important that we are able to do that. So hopefully, councillors, you can support these inclusions, and I'm confident that the organisation will be able to find that happy balance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to obviously support Councillor Natoli. I've great policy, Tanya. I'd like to compliment you on the work that's been carried out. But yeah, definitely owner responsibility is one of our priorities in our community, and I feel that witnessing it personally at designated hotspots which we have around our region. I won't note them for now, but I'm sure we can go into more discussion as we move along. But you know, I've witnessed people with 3 or 4 dogs on a lead, and they've just got no control of these dogs. We've got areas that have got disability access, and I've personally watched a disabled gentleman park his motorised mobility scooter and have to crawl down to a beach access, and this access absolutely reeks of dog urine, because every dog that goes down an easement or whatever, they obviously make their mark. So a real concern for our disabled that use some of these areas that are so well accessed, and I'm actually relating to beach accesses, which is probably the biggest issue here. The use of our officers to enforce our educational process, I think that might be, if that's a term for maybe a volunteer service, to maybe take that on and maybe have our officers more towards the enforcement would be much appreciated. And as well as the hours of use for certain areas, I think we really need to look at. It's been heavily impacted, and we are witnessing some beaches that I know residents are reluctant to visit because of the high use and the lack of owner responsibility on these areas. So yes, I'd just like to say I'll read.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Hungerford.
Just trying to question what's going to be achieved here. A workshop with dates, what's that going to tie up in the staff resourcing? Because when I read this, initial consultation putting together this plan with internal stakeholders as well as Council's animal rehoming partners, acknowledging the needs of all areas of the community by ensuring a balanced approach, needs of pet owners and non-pet owners alike. Council undertook a 6-week engagement program with the community. Then there was a second round of community consultation that resulted in over 500 submissions from community members to put this together, and that resulted in the development of the plan snapshot for quick reference for easier reading, and that's what we're doing here. So I'm saying we're going to go back over this all again. I'm just wondering whether it's the wheel going round and round, like we're starting again. If this work's already been done and the result of this, what's going to be achieved by what's being proposed here, or are we starting from scratch again?
Can you answer that, Tanya, in terms of where you see the difference between the work that's been done and what's been requested?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that these actions that have been identified here would form part of our action plan, so it wouldn't affect the actual management plan for domestic animals, cats and dogs as the plan document, but we can incorporate these, or the outcomes of these 3 points in our action plan, which is reviewed annually, just to make sure that we are covering off on and ensuring that we are hitting the mark with the community around managing public spaces and improving the way that we do our regulation enforcement and education.
Okay, does that help you?
It just sort of seems to me like we're redoing what's just been done again. I'm just not identifying what is missing that we're hoping to pick up. And because of this being worked with the officers more before this came to council here to identify those areas for a motion like this, because I'm seeing a motion for action and I can't see the deficiency that is there unless there's some deficiencies here, but I think that should have been identified and brought to our attention before we come to this stage.
Sure.
I think if councillors go to page 278, 280 and 282 and read what the community told us, and most of these dot points, apart from the knowledge of regulations, you talk about pet owners and non-pet owners coexisting, accountability of actions of the animals, responsibility of the owner owning a pet, and then you go into barking dogs in residential areas, managing dog behaviours on beaches and footpaths, dog waste being left behind, dog waste not being collected by owners on walkways and beaches, the effective and safe management of pets in public spaces, roaming pets and their potential impacts on ecosystems, safe communities. All of these are really, they're pretty much 80% of what the community said, and I'm not sure that this document, this plan actually reflects that. So that's the reason why I think putting these into the action plan that the officers are going to work at, and they said that it's going to be reviewed every year, then it is a reflection of what the people did say. I'm not sure the document went far enough to be able to really articulate that.
So just to follow on from that, and what we've got there is you're wanting more enforcement action rather than deficiency in the actual management plan, wanting a greater emphasis on going out and enforcing and infringing and that sort of thing, actually enforcing the rules that are there on paper. So you're wanting a greater enforcement action rather than any deficiency that's in the plan itself. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a reasonable interpretation, but
yeah, from what I just heard, that's what it sounds like to me.
Definitely the first 2 points, yes.
Yep. So rather than go through this again, we need to work with the animal management people to look at that if we want to go into that program, because that's going to require people put on the ground to do it and budget to go with it. I think that's the further work we need to do, because I can't see any deficiency in here and having to go through it all again. If that's the focus, then we need to do a separate way of working on that.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Mr. Mayor, from a portfolio point of view, I'd actually like Mr. Rupre to come forward and offer some comment. I'd appreciate his insights at least.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, we did have conversations with Councillor Natoli in drafting up this particular amendment and the nuances and what that would mean. Look, I personally don't see that there'd be a deficiency in the plan or the action plan, but in saying that, I think that these actions are appropriate and they're not something that we would be opposed to by any means, should Council be of the mind to move forward and resolve these. The compliance and hotspots is something that we've looked at in more recent times, particularly right across the regulatory spectrum. It's definitely where we're looking to go into the future, so this aligns with what will eventually be presented to Council from an enforcement and regulatory point of view anyway. The review of noise complaints is something that I think that we should be doing routinely, as is anyway, and the volunteer program, of course, is something that's worthwhile looking into. Whether this would lead to a further amendment of action plans post this year or the actual management plan itself, or would be integrated into the enforcement policy and procedures at the time that is reviewed later on this calendar year, that's something we'd look at, whether it was strictly a regulatory enforcement issue and it had to do with the enforcement position of Council, or whether it fell into the purview of the plan itself. I would say, councillors, and in the additional information that's been provided, I think it's the second last page, there is a graph there that shows that since the 2017-18 year, the program has been extremely successful in reducing the number of complaints and animal incidents and dog attacks. So for the past 3 years, the program that we've run has been very successful, and anything that we brought back to you, we would try and ensure would maintain that continued reduction, continued compliance throughout the program. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Go to Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to get my head around what your core intent or the outcomes you're looking for out of this program. So can I just check? So items 1 and 2, which is to discuss the development of an operational procedure, suggests that there isn't an operational procedure now that's at least satisfactory.
Probably more the trigger on how do you identify a hotspot and what are the mechanisms that lead up to identifying and actually then put in the resources. That's more
so the trigger's part of an operational procedure that you think is deficient. Can I ask, do we think that we don't have an operational procedure that covers point 1, the intent of point 1 now, and the same with point 2, which is to conduct a review for a management of animal noise complaints? Don't we have a good management of noise complaints now? And I can imagine point 3, which is really the animal education volunteer program, is maybe the one that we don't have. But could I get you to just tell me, is it deficient? Is this management plan, which is brand new, had been through all the consultation, all of the experienced officers, etc., do we have those 2 deficiencies or not?
Through the chair, so as Mr. Repry said, the actions that Councillor Natoli has suggested are consistent with the actions in the plan, and I think they could be delivered under the existing actions as sort of sub-items that we consider. In relation to the hotspot significantly, we don't have an operational plan specifically, but with all of the work that we do, we generally take a risk-based response. So when we start to see an emergence of an issue in an area, we will plan an approach for an area, which I think is probably in line with what Councillor Natoli is suggesting from my discussions with him. So certainly this would just be around formalising some of that expectation, because obviously when we target an area or invest a lot of time and effort into a space, it takes our attention away from other areas. So I think it's really important from a region-wide perspective that we be really transparent around what that shift in resources means if we make a decision to declare a hotspot and then take the appropriate action. In relation to the noise management of noise complaints, we certainly have an existing process that's really robust and has been really effective. As with any process, we certainly have outliers from time to time, and that can be from a variety of issues. Obviously, when you're dealing with 20 staff trying to implement the same process, not everyone always takes a similar approach as what might meet our expectations, and we follow that up as that arises. But we have internal escalation points. So the review of that process is actually something that's already underway. It's something that we schedule sort of every 1 to 2 years to make sure we're meeting current expectations using current technology and techniques available. So it's not something outside of what we'd already be delivering. And the volunteer program is certainly one we don't have at the moment, so it would be good to investigate that as an option.
Can I have a follow-up? Look, thank you for that, because the way I was hearing both the report and having read the success of the report as well, I was concerned that it was implying there was these deficiencies which I couldn't quite see, and having been involved for 9 years, I didn't necessarily think I agreed with that those deficiencies were there. Having said that, Councillor Natoli, did you take the opportunity to ask your questions about whether the report mechanisms could deal with items 1 and 2 rather than bring them to a resolution of council? Are you not satisfied that the action plan has sufficient flexibility and sufficient broadness for you to achieve those outcomes without them being resolutions?
Charlotte said, it's more about being very clear and transparent with what our processes are and how we deal with this. I mean, this I sent out to the community. Once this was publicly released, I sent it out to the community, and the feedback that I got was quite extensive. They felt that it didn't meet their expectations in terms of regulations. So this is really, again, trying to get a better understanding of how we could actually make it very clear and how do we warn a community when things are starting to merge before it becomes a hotspot. What are our processes of indicating to our community that we have some real concerns about what's happening here, and we may declare it a hotspot, and if we do, then there's zero tolerance. That's the sort of expectation I believe that people who've contributed to this documentation have in the way that council will react to their requests and their concerns and issues that they have with dog behaviour in public areas. Now, I'm hoping that we can find a process that's very visible and understandable and that can be included, and so that the community can understand that. In regards to the 2 residents that I've been made aware of and spoken to, 3 years I think is a long time for them to be putting up with issues of barking dogs, and I know it's very difficult, and often owners will do the right thing and then go back and relax, and it gets to a point where honestly the mental health of these people was shattered by the time I met with them. So it really is incumbent upon us to try and make sure that we don't allow these things to escalate to a point where it takes 3 years to resolve. That's all I'm saying, is that if there is some part of our review that can make sure that we can shorten that time frame and we don't end up with 3 years, I don't know what the appropriate time frame is, but if there are mechanisms that can pick up and say warning bells, that we should really be making sure that we get onto this. And that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for a conclusive outcome. It's giving the opportunity for the officers to take this away and come back, part of our action plan that they would be putting together anyway.
Okay, Councillor Nabrowski. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a problem with the intent of the amendments that Councillor Natoli is putting forward, but I share some of the same views, I suppose, as some of the other councillors in terms of, I think you've already covered it in the action plan. Just done a quick scan against the 3 items and some of the actions you've got in the plan. Tanya, would you be able to, if I try and correlate each one, just let me know if there's anything that's missing in terms of what Councillor Natoli is putting up. So the first point in the resolution I think would apply to action item number 9, which is schedule a council workshop to discuss the development of an operational procedure for the identification, designation and response to non-compliance hotspots. And action item 9 says provide ongoing community support with free responsible pet ownership initiatives. And the measures in here include number of microchipping days, but it also includes an increase in number of impounded cats and dogs returned to their owners, and number of barking dog seminars, increase in barking dog complaints. Would that be the correct one to be looking at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It definitely touches on some of those points, Councillor Suarez. I think the intent of that action was more around general complaints and not necessarily just hotspots, but as Ms Jacobs alluded to and mentioned, we do take a targeted approach where we do receive an increase in complaints. So we definitely do have a mechanism to deal with that. And we are looking at new ways of identifying the number of uses in popular spaces. So we're looking at working with smart cities, for instance, to look at ways that we can actually identify high use areas and then look at mechanisms we can put in place to deal with that and educate the community and work with those spaces.
Sorry, my apologies. I think I was actually, I should have been referring to item action 10 instead of 9. That was my fault, which was the number of patrols conducted, reduction in number of public nuisances reported, reduction in number of reported dog attacks or menacing dogs on beaches and foreshores, reduction in the number of complaints regarding dog waste disposal, and reduction in number of investigation, enforcement and prosecution activities undertaken. So that's, I think, the activities that are happening in these hotspots. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct. So that does cover that point.
Okay, so sorry for getting that action item wrong in the first place. And then resolution number 2, conduct a review of the management of animal noise complaints to avoid prolonged noise nuisances. And I know that one does drive people crazy. Action item, would it be action item number 9, which I spoke to before, or action item number 17, which was continue to contribute to review of council's local laws to support the delivery of animal management services in accordance with the plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that action item number, yes, that one would relate actually to both, to the hotspots, because we would also then review the areas as required, as well as dealing with noise nuisances. We deal with approximately 1,500 noise nuisance complaints a year. 300 of those are actually substantiated as being issues. And we do, in circumstances, it is really difficult. It's a very, very complex problem, barking dogs, unfortunately. It does rely heavily on a change of behaviour of an animal and people. And we do have a lot of points in the plan itself talking about correct breed of dog, looking at your circumstances and addressing it in a holistic approach as well as reviewing the way that we undertake our enforcement action and complaints management in that space.
So would you say that the actions you've got in the current plan would address item number 2 in
Yes.
the new resolution? Okay, and then the final one is item number 3, which is investigate options to create an animal education volunteer program for active promotion of responsible pet ownership in council's public spaces. Now, I had a look at action item number 2. When you have a look at the measures, it talks about the number of partners and external stakeholders distributing resources. I think that's a fantastic idea. I would be a little concerned if those animal education volunteers were trying to undertake some compliance, because it's quite confrontational. But would action item number 2 cover the intent that Councillor Natoli is wishing for in resolution number 3?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe it would.
Okay, so all of those 3 points are essentially covered in the plan. So if we were to go with this resolution, and maybe this is a question for the CEO, what additional resources would we be requiring in terms of undertaking these 3 actions? Would there be a cost to council in terms of resourcing or finances?
Thanks for the question. I don't believe that there would be any change to what we have already been proposing for the year. What I see these actions doing is putting some timeframes around specific actions that are out of the plan that give some specific dates there. But as you pointed out, the plan is very comprehensive and covers a range of other actions as well that all need to be undertaken as well as part of the overall plan.
And so then, Madam CEO, are these timeframes achievable? I think I heard the answer before, but I just want to double check.
I understand they are, and I understand the team has worked with Councillor Natoli at that time.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you, Madam CEO. Yes, we did work with Councillor Natoli to work up the dates to make sure that they are achievable under the proviso that there's workshop availability, etc. So I have no immediate problems with the timeframes as stated.
So I guess just trying to wrap my head around it, the 3 requests are essentially covered by the plan. They've just got timeframes associated with them.
Correct.
And there will be no cost to council to undertake these.
Through.
No additional cost to council to undertake providing those workshops. Of course, those workshops could come out with some undertakings that might have a cost to council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Chair. When I think about all the types of issues that generate a lot of discussion for Division 3, undoubtedly dogs and pets would have to be in the top 3, and I'm sure that applies to quite a few of us in the room. Mostly in the forms of complaints from off-leash and on-leash areas, and barking, roaming, attacks and the like. So that is why I think this management plan for domestic animals here before us today is actually a well-rounded and comprehensive document which gives me, and no doubt the community, a good starting point to navigate through the coming years, especially with the challenges of population growth. It's particularly encouraging to hear that some of the stats, as I know Mr Ruprise just touched on year, have been reducing as a result of those increased patrols, some of the prosecution activity, which I commend Council for going down that path, as well as the education programs. And no doubt we'll still experience the frustrations of dealing with irresponsible owners. So the suggestion that I read that we're going to undertake some data collection, which was contained in the information, I think that would certainly be really good to have that information to make sure that we're making better informed decisions, and I think that would be a great outcome to sort of undertake that process. Initially, I did have, when Councillor Natoli gave this to me this morning just to have a read through, I did have some initial concerns that there may be additional sort of financing or resourcing costs to Council, but through the discussion this morning, I feel a lot more confident about that not being the case. And I just also wanted to touch on the additional information. It was referred to the graph previously, but the last page, which was the animal requests and complaints by locality, and obviously I'm talking specifically to C.1 there, where it talks about those hotspots. And if I was to correlate that with the information that's been provided on that last page, it actually identifies some areas like Budrum, Nambour, Maroochydore, Bly as supposedly hotspots. And I'm not too sure that would be where we think the hotspots would be. So I'm looking forward to that workshop if we have it, because I'm sure we'll be able to flesh out the actual true issues rather than this. And it could be because the suburbs are quite large and the number of registrations in some of those, like Budrum, it's probably twice the size of the entire Kawana precinct. So yeah, I just think we need to obviously have that discussion in that workshop. So I look forward to that. And I just want to thank the staff for putting this report together, and also thanking the community that provided the information through that consultation, because we've taken that and used that information to really, I think, cement a well-rounded document.
Thank you, Councillor Cock. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. A question, if I may, that the additional items were described as being appropriate. So I'm interested to understand the reasons that they weren't included at the outset. It's a very, very comprehensive plan, but if these are appropriate, how was this not included? But I think that question may have been answered because we've actually established that they are included. So question 2 is the reason that we need to include them as a resolution, as opposed to allowing the plan to take its force from the plan and go with the plan, rather than the plan plus 3 extras.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the actions that have been highlighted certainly have been captured at a higher level. So given the complexity of dealing with the management of animals on a day-to-day basis and changing needs in the community, we have kept the plan as a bit more of a high-level strategy focus. So some of the detail isn't necessarily captured because it's going to depend on what the immediate and emerging needs are at the time. As we've seen over the last 2 years with COVID, the experiences of our community rapidly change. So it's important that our plan, while providing that long-term view, allows us that flexibility with the annual plan and then the subsequent actions underneath those items to respond to those changing needs. We can certainly include these actions without a resolution, and we can also note them in the action plan specifically if that's of use to council, to provide that certainty and transparency around the actions.
Thank you very much for the answer, and I guess that gives me some comfort that I would sooner that you've got the framework and structure to work with at that high level, so that you can respond very immediately and flexibly to the emerging needs on the ground in the community, as opposed to these 3 because they've been put forward today. So thank you for that answer. The management plan came with a huge amount of community consultation, 2 rounds of consultation. From what I can gather from the report, close to 2,000 submissions, responses, input from the community. 2 separate pop-up sessions, the first one at 19 locations, the second round at 26 locations. So my question is possibly more for Councillor Joe. In the community consultation you referred to, has that come from within that huge volume of community engagement or something else?
That community that I've gone out to obviously contributed this side, where when we were out for public consultation, put it on my Facebook. I've made it very clear to the community that they should have a big say, and there are specific groups that I talk to directly encouraging them to do exactly the same. Having this document come to council, it's obviously appropriate for me to alert them that there is a document in its final stages and for them to make comment. I think these actions here clearly highlight to the community that we are going to take these matters seriously, and they're highlighted in a particular way to be able to allow us to deal with it. Because dog management, my area where I live, all the dogs are local. In other areas that I represent, there are a lot of imported dogs that are coming from all over the place that are impacting the local areas differently. And I think we need to understand all of this complex arrangement of how we live and how we interact within our local areas. And it's difficult sometimes to be able to come up with a process that a local council might be putting pressure to move forward. I'd rather have it very clear of how it triggers a process for us then to scale things up. I think it's clear that if we have that, then there's no ambiguity in regards to whether I should be putting pressure on the officers to do something when the policy may not actually warrant that. So I think that in itself will be a much clearer way of being able to articulate to the community that this is a process that we go through in scaling things up. And if you want more enforcement, because resources are scarce, believe me, we will never have enough people out there monitoring and regulating. So unless we come up with clear, decisive processes of how we articulate that to the community, and I think this is something that our community, my community has certainly said to me that this is what they want, and obviously I think having it highlighted here gives us some assurance that we will actually give them some focus on that area.
Thank you, Councillor Joe. So I would, I think I'd like to speak to the motion, if I may.
Thank you.
And my first comment will be that I would foreshadow that I will not be supporting the motion as it stands, but would like to return to the original proposal from the staff. And my main reason for that is that what is contained in this plan demonstrates a comprehensive, long-term consultation process with our community, using the community engagement framework that the community development section of council have put a huge investment of resources into creating for us. We've supported that further in our budget today, and I'm not sure that I can support a subset or a different route of going around reliable community engagement to inform our policy and process at this level. Our job is to provide really good policy and framework for the staff to work to respond to the emerging need on the ground day by day. And I believe the plan does that, and I don't think that this helps the plan, and it actually undermines all of the work we've done for good community consultation that is evidence-based, that is based upon the best research available to us in a collaborative project with USC to get to a point that in the budget this morning we are better resourcing our community engagement processes. So I would like to not lose the plan and the work that we've done by saying I would support going back to the original motion, but I can't support this as it is for the reasons stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor O'Prey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you. It's a real shame that this debate and discussion has revolved around 95% of the conversation, those 3 dot points that are on there in the request, rather than the excellent work that the staff have done and the amazing report that's before us and that management plan. Those pictures in there are the best I've ever seen. It's one of the best plans I've ever seen put together, and yet we're here talking for an hour about 3 simple requests that could be done to any officer in this establishment. This is crazy. I think we're wasting a lot of time here. We've very clearly heard that the existing processes cover all these requests. Every single one of them. It's a simple phone call to the managers. This should not be tagged onto the back of a wonderful report that I've talked about.
It shouldn't be brought to an ordinary meeting. I will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope that you'll accept my earlier
questions.
So I'd like to speak to the amended motion now. In a similar vein to Councillor O'Prey, I was listening very carefully about were these deficits that needed to be fixed. And through Councillor Suarez's questions, we established very clearly that the existing plan covers off on these 3 points. So they're not deficits. So I don't really feel that it respects the process and acknowledges the considerable work, as Councillor Law made clear, for really the development of a complete management plan that will manage these issues. And to highlight them strikes me as just putting time frames on them, which, look, I'll use the phrase muscles the outcomes to a particular community or a particular view of what should happen when. And I don't think that's appropriate. If we were to do that with every single report, I think it would start to introduce a level of real difficulty. So I can't support this amended motion, and I'd be happy to support either the original or even move it. So, councillors, I won't be supporting this amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hungerford, you've got a question?
No, I'm going to speak this time. I've asked enough questions. And I'll echo what I'm hearing from my fellow councillors, and I brought it up in the beginning. I was grappling to understand this. Extensive public consultation has gone to putting this together in the report, and I've gone through it and thought it's an excellent report. Those 3 points, it's already been established, are covered in the report, and I'm glad that Peter pointed out that Budrum's a hotspot. We'll get dog and animal issues. I get it on a weekly, daily basis. And I quite often work with Tanya and Shanna, quite often to talk about these issues and how to deal with it, and I liaise back to people with complaints and things. And I can tell you this department does a brilliant job. Got all of that going on. You can't keep everyone happy all the time. But our staff have to go through an extensive legal procedure with complaints and dealing with everyone fairly, the complainant and the other person. Everyone has to be treated fairly. It's a difficult area to work in, and they do it very well. And to go through this here, that's already held in the report, to put us through another workshop of sitting here going over the same stuff that's already covered, I just can't understand. We're too busy for that sort of stuff. If there was deficiencies in here, we would have all brought it up, and we'd be looking at focusing on those areas. An amendment to a motion here, to put extra points in there, should only be where there's a clear deficiency we can all see and does need work on it. Because there mightn't be a direct financial cost there, but our time of sitting here and having the staff come and present to us, that's all a cost to council. And they've already done this work, and quite extensively. So I'm getting angry with this because I won't be supporting this, and I'll be supporting the original motion, because I think it's far more practical and sensible to go down that path, because there is no deficiency in this report that I can see.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr
Are you
Mayor.
asking a question or
Yes,
talking?
asking a question.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Tanya, just in Appendix B, a couple of comments that came up were quite interesting. Bly is one of the top suburbs in terms of complaints. And what I'm hearing from my community is, yes, I'm getting complaints for animal behaviour within Bly, but also that community go out to Mudjimba to the beach to take their dogs to the beach, and that's not on the list here, but I get complaints, I'm hearing complaints about animal activity there. So my question is, with this data that's been collected, are these numbers the location of the incident or the address of the complainant?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Just going to have to check with Shanna on that one. Through you, Mr Mayor. They are reported as the location of the incident. It's important to remember that that's a holistic view of all the complaints. What we find with hotspots, particularly areas like Mudjimba that you're describing, is that you'll start to receive a cluster of those. So we've been doing a lot of work internally to make that data much more accessible and visible for the team.
to help us make a more informed and data-based decision on those hotspots when you're comparing multiple people having concerns to one or two members of the community presenting a concern, just to make sure that we're addressing and balancing those resources in the right way.
I might just speak quickly to the motion, Mr. Mayor. Okay.
Well,
I asked questions before.
Well, I actually thought you might have spoken to it, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But what I'm going to say to all councillors is that a number of you have probably been at the edge of questioning and commenting at the same time. So just be, it's difficult enough to keep everyone in line, let alone having to determine that as well. So if you can just remember that in future, it might help if you've got a question, jump up, say I've got a question, and then stick to the question.
Noted. So, look, I don't find these additional requests offensive. I think those three topics are ones that I'm hearing a lot from my community as well, and I would have been happy to support it, but I have been swayed throughout the debate regarding the process and the community consultation. So should this not get up, would the process, apart from council resolution, still be to assist Councillor Natoli with those three key areas? And if there was some additional information regarding the workshop operational procedures and identification of responses, I'm happy to work with Councillor Natoli on those issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely, Councillor Suarez, there are those opportunities there. We are currently doing the work on reviewing the barking dog process, which is, as Ms. Jacobs said, something we do regularly, and we are already engaging with smart cities to look at ways of establishing pinch points or areas of concern in public spaces, specifically with mixed uses, animals, people on bicycles, that kind of thing.
Thank you. I think we're back to you, Councillor Natoli, to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think some of the comments in regards have been disrespectful to the whole process and the public consultation. I don't accept that, because I do respect that we've given the community a great opportunity to have a say, and I've been very heavily involved in making sure my community, we had a lot of comments that came from the postcodes within my community. And that was the amount of work, because I know it's a big issue in my area. I know it's an issue in other areas. I know our community are on the watch, and they are very mindful that, you know, we as a council, we're both a regulator, but we're also a policy maker, and we have to try and find a way that we can bring the community along. And when we do have problems in areas, then sometimes we need to really think about how we do that. This plan, as much as it does pick up, and I made notations that the first 3 dot points of the action plan could fit in with the education program in terms of volunteers. It doesn't specifically say in the action plan that we will use volunteers. It talks about the council resources as well as our key stakeholders that we have in there. We had a workshop on this. I did bring up the issue about hotspots, and we did have a good talk about it. In fact, during the budget process that we went through, if you might remember in Nambour, we actually were given an indication or we had to give an indication to our officers whether we wanted to move away from just education to a more compliance base, and there was a clear indication that councils wanted some shift. And so I think by highlighting this it gives the community an understanding that we are understanding and are willing to do that. And again, all this does is give an opportunity. In terms of the dates that have been placed there, they were dates suggested by the organisation, not by me. I'm not putting any time frames in terms of putting that pressure on them. I gave them the issues that I had. They came back and responded and provided those dates, which I would have thought were time frames that they were comfortable with. So, you know, for me, I'm more than willing to work with the organisation. But just because this document comes to us in this final format, it's incumbent on us right up to the last minute to be able to take feedback from our community, be able to give that feedback back through a process and a formal process. And I think all I'm trying to do is maybe help structure and help improve some aspects of the plan, which I think is fantastic. I said that last week. I thought that this plan that we've been put together is a comprehensive one and well thought out one. But there's some areas that I think, based on the comments and the feedback that we had in the plan, just may not have been as strongly stated in the plan as what the community may have expected. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Natali. We'll put Councillor Natali's motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Landsberg, Cox, Natali, Dixon. And those opposed? Councillor Babarowski, Johnston, Hungerford, O'Prey, Suarez, Law, Jamieson. The motion's defeated. Councillor Law, you'd foreshadowed that you would go back to the officer's recommendation. Happy to do that. Can we have a seconder? Councillor O'Prey. You're open, Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've possibly debated, discussed, questioned sufficiently on this, other to say than we do need to have in there, I believe, on Part B, that it's as amended, just to capture the typo that was in there. So we do need to leave that in place, and I acknowledge that additional wording to enable the report to be amended. And to talk in support of the original motion, the community consultation was impressive and has been responded to with an excellent document from Tanya, from the team, from the whole section there. And I believe that you've got the framework to take on board the initial feedback and the initial comments right at this last moment that have been brought to us through Councillor Joe, and that we will be able to deliver an excellent response to all pet owners across the whole Sunshine Coast. So I have nothing else to add at this particular moment other than my full support for an excellent piece of work demonstrating outstanding community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Prey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just for absolute clarity, Madam CEO, the existing processes that we've got right now cover and encapsulate all those three requests that we talked about on the last item. We debated and discussed for an hour, and I just wanted to know that so that the councillors that supported the one before can vote for this and be comfortable and know the fact that those requests will be covered.
Yes.
Yes, Councillor, that's correct. The team have absolutely covered and incorporated all of these actions within the actions of the plan as it stands.
Thank you very much. I'll be supporting the motion, Mr. Mayor. It was an hour to get there.
Thank you. Councillor Natali.
Mr. Mayor, in respect of our officers and our organisation, I will support this recommendation, albeit that my amendment was not supported. But I do so on the basis that I know the tremendous work that our officers do. I know how much pressure they're under, and I wouldn't have their job for all the money in the world. I wouldn't. It's one of the most difficult jobs in dealing with public and dealing with the community. And often these things do flare up, and it takes an enormous skill and intestinal fortitude to be able to work through those issues. Confrontation. Some of the things that happen in our local areas is just disgraceful when you can see humans just can't get along. Dogs probably get along a lot better than what some of the humans do. And the action of some people in our community, the way that they treat public space, whether it's with dogs or litter or whatever, we are seeing a disrespect within our public spaces that I think is just incumbent upon us to make sure that we find those people that don't respect the rules and the laws and what the structure that we put around them, and make sure that they are actually made to understand that we won't accept that. So I will support this, but I thank the councillors and I thank the officers with the opportunity for any other councillor that wants to get involved, because I know my community expects me to continue to pursue this, and I will certainly do that under the structuring process of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. Councillor Law, would you like to close? Okay, we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Johnson, you've got to depart, I understand. Thank you. Safe travels. Councillors, we'll move. Thank you for that, Tanya. We'll move to item 8.11, which is the major event sponsorship for the Mooloolaba Triathlon. I just drew to your attention that there is a confidential attachment to this report, and I invite Bryn Skilbeck to give us the presentation. Thanks, Bryn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. So the topic in this presentation is the option to renew council sponsorship of the Mooloolaba Triathlon from 2022 to 2024. Councillors will note that the Mooloolaba Triathlon has been an iconic event for the region for 29 years now, and they are looking forward to celebrating their 30th anniversary of the event in March of 2022. It's one of the longest running events of its type. It remains the second largest triathlon event in Australia, and one that has a national and international profile as a very high visibility and promotional event for the region. In one way or another, Council has been a supporter and sponsor of the event since its inception, including a range of major event sponsorships since the formation of the Major Events Board. It's also worth noting that the event is heavily backed by the state government through Tourism and Events Queensland, and Council works in partnership with them in terms of the support of the event itself and the outcomes that are derived for the region in visitation and promotion. The most recent contract for the event covered our investment from 2019 to 2021, and across those 3 years we've been tracking the outcomes, and pleasingly through some challenging times, particularly around COVID and different changes in the way that these events are operating, we've seen that this is a very stable event. In terms of the number of participants, have stayed stable around 4,000 participants each year in the overall event, the vast majority of which are from outside of the region, and the economic benefit created by the hosting of this as a major event has been very stable at around $5 million for the region for each hosting of the event. We have certainly noted over the years and discussed with many council members about that any on-road event does have an impact on the local community and local businesses. So there's been a significant amount of work done between council and Ironman, who are the event organisers of the Mooloolaba Triathlon, about how we can reduce this impact for our local people and for businesses. So you'll note there are a couple of successes recently have been a significant reduction in the days of road closures involved in the setup of the facilities required for the event, and also in the number of car parks affected. We also do quite a lot of engaging with local businesses about what the outcomes are from this event, and we would note that there is an overwhelming support for the fact that it's a very iconic event for the region and an important piece of our national positioning as both the events and tourism destination, but that there is continued work to be done as to how we can continue to work with local businesses to increase their opportunities to operate either on a business as usual basis or to take advantage of the fans and participants that are participating in the event. One key thing to note that Ironman have been working on, particularly around this event but nationally, is their event sustainability strategy. We believe that as an organisation they lead the nation in terms of sustainability for events like this, and have had some great results over the last few years, and in fact we use Ironman as a council organisation to help educate some of our other event organisers about things that can be done. So in terms of using compostable cups, to reducing waste usage, to all sorts of small detail that Ironman have gone into to make the event as sustainable from a environmental position as possible. In terms of future planning for the event, as I noted earlier, we're looking forward to celebrating the 30th anniversary of the event within Mooloolaba with Ironman and all of its participants, and we would expect a very strong demand for that, both from regular participants but also people that have participated in the event before and want to come back and celebrate 30 years of an iconic event. Based on a number of discussions we've had with councillors and other representatives within council, there is ongoing work around the two areas of improvements that we can make in terms of how we communicate and work with local businesses, and also about how we maximise the use of the marketing benefits that are gained from being associated with events on the scale of Ironman. So that is continued work that will be listed in the contract of the benefits we're looking to maximise and the sorts of plans that we're doing as a region to promote us not just as a tourism destination but in all other aspects of council work that we want to promote out to a national audience. So in summary, the recommendation from our team involved in receiving the submission from the Mooloolaba Triathlon is that we receive and note the report and authorise the CEO to proceed with entering into a contract for the event from 2022 to 2024.
Thank you, Bryn. Someone to move? Councillor O'Prey. Seconder? Councillor Natoli, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Again, well done and congratulations to the officers on this, particularly through Greg's and Bryn and Andy Brown in the back, who's probably here for his first ever event report. And also congratulations to the Sunshine Coast Events Board. Councillors, we rarely see events come to this table and to this chamber these days, and that's because of the wonderful success of the Sunshine Coast Events Board's ability to make these decisions on our behalf and for the ratepayer, and have done now for some 6, 7, it's coming up 8 years actually. So it's great that we've actually got one coming before us today, because I get to bang on a little bit about the Sunshine Coast events, Mr Mayor. So the Mooloolaba Triathlon, it's been around for nearly 30 years. They have over 4,000 competitors, and they come from all parts of the planet to come here to our part of the region to race triathlon. That includes 10,000 in total, friends and family, coaches, spectators and the like, that come to Mooloolaba, to the Sunshine Coast. And they end up spending money. They spend, like I said, $5 million, but it's right across the whole region. So they'll go to the Australia Zoo, they'll go up to the hinterland, they'll go and spend money, have a coffee at the Coolum and even down in Caloundra. So it's a wonderful event for the whole region, not just Mooloolaba Central. It's one of our best events on the calendar with a long, long history. We heard you say it's coming up 30 years. I actually thought it was a little bit older, Bryn, but it's been around for a very long time. It's had a number of locations across the Mooloolaba precinct. They've had different locations for the transition areas as well, and different swimming locations. The conditions sometimes go a bit topsy-turvy with the ocean and the surf kicks up, but they've managed really, really well. And Ironman have done a wonderful job in lifting this precinct, so this region, as the global hotspot for triathlon. You know, we've got Noosa down the road. We credit where credit's due. They do a wonderful job with their Noosa Triathlon. The Mooloolaba Triathlon, they're in the top 3 in the world. But on top of that, we've also got the Caloundra Triathlon, we've got the Kawana Triathlon, we've got the Pink Triathlon, we've got all the schools triathlons that take place. We had the 70.3 get introduced a few years ago, which is again through Ironman. And then on top of that, in 2016, we hosted the World Championships of 70.3 Ironman. So it's a pretty big deal for this region, and it all stems from both the Mooloolaba and the Noosa Triathlon. It's highly recommended from the Sunshine Coast Events Board. They can't talk highly enough about this event. They think it's a wonderful event. It's a signature event for the region, and the Sunshine Coast Events Board see hundreds of events go across their desk every year. So if it comes, a good recommendation comes from them. It's certainly got my support, and I'm hoping for the council's support today, and I'd encourage you all to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'll obviously love to support this motion as well. Well spoken, Councillor O'Prey. It's no doubt it's a no-brainer in terms of the economic benefits that it puts to our region. Really buoyed by the Super Kids Triathlon that they initiated as well. I think that's a great start-up. You never know where those kids could be competing in the next decade or so. But also just obviously touch on the access to the database. I mean, I just see some figures here of 45,000 in terms of their database. Do we have access in council to that facility through the Ironman or through the Ironman Oceania events as well?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, definitely. They are clauses within our contract that we have an amount of access to those databases in terms of spreading EDMs, using them at their massive social media reach, their online broadcast of events all around Australia. So there is a wide range of opportunities Council has each year to broadcast all sorts of messages that we want to do on behalf of Council.
Thank you, Bryn. And also, obviously, we're seeing the numbers steadily increase in light of what the impacts we've witnessed in the last 12 months. And also the volunteer services, 580 people that are involved in this event, a wonderful support from our greater community, very similar to the numbers that are involved in the Clown and Music Festival as well, which I might like to add. So, yep, look forward to supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lansbury. Councillor Natali.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and great work, Bryn. I really am thankful for the fact that you've understood what the impact of this triathlon over the years has been in Mooloolaba. And of course, it used to take up its main car parks, tie up the streets for nearly a week, and the impacts on retailers and businesses, as much as it was positive that we got all this used to get national television coverage, it was all positive in one way that promoted the region, but those businesses, once a year, some of them were so severely impacted that they actually didn't want us to support the triathlon there. They would actually prefer not to have it there. So, trying to work in with the different needs and impacts that we have in the area, I think you've done a brilliant job in being able to reduce that impact in times and constantly working towards those outcomes. I've met with the operators of the Ironman series, and they're very professional. Great people to work with and be able to talk, and very open about the fact that maybe that one time of the year that they do come is not enough for us to actually get an economic benefit, to be able to market to that database, and especially with, I think, what was the actual 70% of them now within a 200-kilometre radius of the competitors? Bryn, is that correct? Was it a large proportion?
I believe it's 70% of the participants are from outside of the region, but that, of course, is a combination of from wider Queensland, but of wider Australia itself. So there are significant numbers coming out of Sydney and Melbourne, for example.
That's right, and for us to be able to market to them and to get them to come back to our region and actually get additional economic benefit, to have that other component within the contract, I think is a really good outcome for this. So as much as I know it does impact some of the business, I am supportive of this being supported by councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, some questions, if I may. Bryn, with the 30th anniversary coming up, what is the anticipated or forecast number of competitors for next year's Ironman?
Through you, Mr Mayor. At this stage, we have based our calculations on the same participation numbers of just over 4,000. A lot of that is due to the restrictions of the space available in Mooloolaba while various works are going on. Having said that, Ironman themselves are very looking to push in as many ways as possible to increase the capacity, because we do believe that there'll be a strong demand around the 30th anniversary. So whilst when we've calculated the benefits here, we've gone conservatively at the same number, we will work with them very closely over the next 8 or 9 months about what we can do to increase that capacity, and hopefully have another 1,000 or 1,500 visitors come up and participate over the event weekend.
Thank you for that. And so would that mean that there is a possibility that the event could sell out? There will be a maximum number of competitors?
We would suggest it's a high likelihood. It actually sold out in this past event, the March 2021 event, because they were running under a limited capacity due to the works and also due to the COVID situation. So that sold out at 4,100. We would expect it would get to that number and greater for next year.
Thank you. Another question. With the media exposure that would the triathlon will get in the lead up and then during the event and post the event, in terms of Mooloolaba being advertised to the nation and possibly internationally, have you got any idea of the level of coverage that achieves for Mooloolaba?
Yes, we do. There's a significant amount of research done for all of the events on this scale that Council sponsors to look at that. What we tend to track is the entire benefits to the region, but in this case we do have some data around the specific mentions of Mooloolaba as an area within the region, but you'll note in the annual report that's provided by the Events Board through us, we do list the outcomes for each event that shows the value, and certainly Mooloolaba Triathlon would be leading that list. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we'll be able to provide that information. It's well into a value of millions of dollars of marketing value that's achieved by the discussions of this event on a national basis.
Okay, thank you. And I would be right to assume that the images that come will be images of Mooloolaba and the coastline in front of Mooloolaba?
Absolutely correct. And a lot of that work is done in partnership with Visit Sunshine Coast, who run a huge amount of their own marketing around this event, centred on Mooloolaba and the beach and business areas that are attracting tourists through this process.
So in essence, would it be reasonable to assume then the business community in Mooloolaba gets a huge, for free, advertising across the nation?
Yes, and we've noted in the report that we believe that the overall feedback from Chamber of Commerce and businesses is that they all agree of the benefit of that in the long term. Of course, the actual benefits across the weekend of the event itself do vary business to business. But overall, as a Mooloolaba as a key part of our region, the perception is that they get great value out of the ongoing promotion, specifically of that region as a holiday destination or any way to interact with our region.
It feels that it could be extremely hard to identify the data, but is it possible to capture the economic benefit over, say, a 6-month period, 3-month period either side of the event, just to try and nut out that economic benefit for Mooloolaba around what they get from the event with the disruption that they may experience during the event? Is it possible to capture that? Or is it just too localised?
We make attempts to do that. The difficulty in that is we are able to track a lot of data around visitation and spend, what is happening in various areas at different times, how much money crosses the counter of different businesses. So we can look at the rise and fall of those across a year. The bit that is harder to track is that we know that visitors from around Australia view the Mooloolaba Triathlon, and that is one of the pieces that inspires them to come and visit or to move here or to interact with our region. It is difficult to prove that it was definitely the triathlon that led to that outcome. And I guess the way that we approach it in working with Visit Sunshine Coast and with the wider economic development branch, and indeed lots of areas of council, is looking at we are part of the puzzle, and there are a number of other areas that are all come together to best promote the region to both nationally and internationally. But I guess to answer your question, the future visitation, we definitely track that, and we do put a certain amount of that down to the success of events, but we certainly don't say that an event is the sole creator of that outcome.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to speak to the motion that I will be supporting the continuing support of this event for all of the reasons that you've just helped work through with me. So thank you for that, and I look forward to another successful set of triathlons for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. If there are no further speakers, I'll go back to Councillor O'Prey to close.
Mr Mayor, Councillor David, you raise a really good point. That it's a question that I've been asking for a number of years, and that's the revisitation question. It's a mystery. One of the only things I think we can do to solve that mystery is to ask the question of the triathletes when they come back a year or two later, did you visit Mooloolaba or the Sunshine Coast between that race and this race? But even then, it's a hard one. So revisitation's a tough one. Mr Mayor, I think it's highly appropriate to actually acknowledge the late Garth Proud as well here today. He is the father of triathlon here on the Sunshine Coast, and he passed away about 4 or 5 years ago now, and he's highly regarded as one of the best events men in the world. And with that, I'd just like to thank the staff again. Greg, please, if you could pass your thanks on to all the major events unit and to Andy as well, please. And councillors, I look forward to your support today. Thank you, and I hope to see you on the line, boss.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. We'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Brendan. Councillors, we now move to notices of motion. There are none. Petitions, 10.1, Councillor Landsberg, Moffat Beach traffic concerns. Would you like to talk to that, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to present to the Madam CEO a petition, 96 pages with 1,378 signatures. The Moffat Beach precinct is under growing pressure from increased traffic volumes, speeding, hooning and vehicle noise. This is occurring in a residential and seaside setting where there is some considerable foot traffic. Thus, we, the undersigned, respectfully petition the Sunshine Coast Council to address the above impacts on the precinct. The Council's response to this petition should make the precinct a safer, quieter and more pleasant place to visit, reside and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Cox. All those in favour of receipt? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.2, Councillor O'Prey, installation of street lighting, car park, Memorial Road, Mudjimba.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a petition to table here in the chambers today. We, the undersigned, respectfully petition the Sunshine Coast Council to expedite installation of street lighting to the car park at Memorial Park, Mudjimba, in the interest of public safety, and refer to Council Job Number TM20027889R. And I'll present that to the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. And I'll take that as being moved by you, seconded by Councillor Hungerford. All those in favour of receipt? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Councillors, before we move into confidential session, and there is one item to be addressed in confidential session, do any of you wish to declare any personal interest in relation to the item to be discussed? If this is the case, you'll also be required to declare any personal interest when Council resumes open session to make decisions on this item. In relation to item 11.1, the Chief Executive Officer advises that the report contains confidential information which should be considered and discussed in a closed session of Council in accordance with section 254J(3)(d) of the Local Government Regulation 2012, as the report contains information relating to negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interest of the local government. For these reasons, it has been recommended that Council close the meeting under section 254J(3)(g) of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to consider and discuss the information in this report. Noting, of course, that Council's decision on this agenda item will be made during open session, which will be viewable by the public. Councillors, is someone prepared to move that we close the meeting to discuss item 11.1? Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Babarowski, thank you. Sorry, we've just got to take a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're going to put the motion which has been moved by Councillor Natoli, seconded by Councillor Hungerford. Do you wish to open or speak to the motion, Councillor? Does anybody wish to ask any questions? Okay. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, 3:31, 3:32, we'll close the meeting. It's been a good day. Thank you all for your input and travel safely.